Good evening. Let's call this meeting to order, the Champaign County Board for the Committee of the Whole for Finance, Policy, Personnel and Appointments, and Justice and Social Services. It is Tuesday, September 12th, 2017. The time is 6:38, I think. Is that right? Yes. Roll call, please.
Furtado. Here. Goss.
Present.
Harper.
Present.
Hardkey. Here. King. Here. Marsh. McGuire. Here. Michaels. Here. Mitchell. Patterson.
Here.
Petrie.
Present.
Rector. Here. Rosales.
Here.
Summers. Here. Tinsley.
Present.
Alex. Here. Anderson. Here. Clemens. Here. Court. Present. Cruz. Esri.
Here.
Weibel.
Present. We have a quorum. Seek approval of the agenda. Moved by Mr. Esri, second by Mr. Hartke. Mr. Alex, you have a couple changes?
Yeah, I'd like to move item G1, which is the county executive salary action, up after B2, after the auditor's report. And I'd like to move the nursing home budget presentation down after E1, so it appears before the rest of the county administrator actions. Just so I think they'll make the meeting flow better.
Any objection to that? Seeing none. Any other changes?
No, and I should mention that was at the suggestion of Mr. McGuire.
Correct. Okay, seeing that we're all happy with that, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Seek approval of the minutes for August 15th, 2017. Moved by Mr. Rosales, second by Mr. Goss. Discussion on the minutes. Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Public participation. We have a couple people tonight. Remember, 5 minutes each. First, Amy Foster. Got a watch or a cell phone? Good. I don't need a timer. Just
Hi,
minutes.
Amy Foster. You guys have seen me here before. I am former Vice President of Local 900, and I just wanted to express some concerns that came about that are in regards to the Insurance Committee recommendation that is supposed to be before you tonight according to the agenda. Our membership had no information given to them prior to the vote made by the committee for the recommendation. We were not asked our opinions, our voice, how it might affect us or impact us, either positively or negatively. So I do not consider that recommendation to be at all the voice of the membership as I was the vice president until Friday. Since we were not given the opportunity to ask any questions or voice any opinions, I was hoping that perhaps this county board would do so for us prior to accepting any recommendation. The memo that we received on Friday said that a negative impact of 50% would be of the current insurance group members, and that's not just our membership, but that's everybody in the insurance group right now. The numbers provided in minutes say that there were 1,014 primary care physician designations. 619 of those are with Carle providers. 87 are for primary care physicians that are in network with Blue Cross. 532 are not. And that means that approximately half of the pool would be required to change their PCP. This has a negative effect on a lot of people that, and I can tell you, I can speak from my position only. I have a couple of chronic conditions that I have to go see my provider. My physician has been my PCP for over 24 years. He took my husband on when we got married. He took both of my children on when they were born. He knows my entire family's history. No brand new physician is going to know that. They're not going to know it. They're not going to understand my health history or my needs. We will have to start from square one. One of the things that I read in the minutes was that Health Alliance was willing to give a revised quote of 30 days after 30 days of reviews, it had appeared to me by reading the minutes that a quote, the vote was taken prior to that. I have had a member of that committee tell me that they believe that all quotes were in, like, right at the time of the vote. If that's the case, that's fine. I would love to know if we did get a new Health Alliance proposal, and if we did, what was it? Was it more? Was it less? You know, and I would also love to know what the vote by the committee, was it unanimous? Were there any no's? If there were, why did those people say no? What were their concerns? I would also like to ask that, I don't understand why this was once a open bidding process. The health insurance companies used to bid against each other all the way down to bare minimum, so that the county and the employees all received the best price possible, the absolute rock bottom. It seems like this has been moved to a closed bidding process now, and it's just one and done. You don't get to know what the other side has bid, so you have no opportunity to bid lower, to give us a better rate. That seems counterproductive to me when we're trying to save money. That being said, the $147,000 savings that Blue Cross Blue Shield is supposedly going to have for the county, it seems like it's going to be eaten up in a salary proposal that's going to be before you today for the executive position that's being proposed to be set at $117,000, the highest it can be. I don't see any reason for it to be set so high immediately, when part of that could go towards a savings on the health insurance and allow us to not have to have half of our group change their personal care. Also, there is a recommendation for 2 more administrative positions. Don't know what those salary recommendations are going to be, but I'm sure that if you add them together, it again could have eaten away at the discrepancy between the 2 proposals that would allow us to keep our primary care physicians. Thank you.
Next, Dottie Vera Weiss.
Hi, good evening, and I guess you all know me. I wasn't here last month because I was out of the state, but I actually watched the most of that meeting on the video afterwards. So, if I leave early tonight, I'm probably going to be doing that because there's a bunch of information that I think will be interesting later. I wanted to talk about information in 3 different contexts. First thing, information about what's happening at the nursing home. I don't know how many of you read the News Gazette article this morning about the nursing home and the reports from the nursing home board meeting last night. I was interested to see that at the beginning it talked about how the nursing home's finances are improving, which I'd also heard elsewhere. And then the last sentence says, the county board's long-term plan for the troubled facility is to improve its operations and finances and then market it and sell it to a private operator sometime in 2018. Now, my understanding was that was a possibility, not a definite plan. I remember when the vote was held on whether or not to put the option of selling the nursing home, selling or disposing of the nursing home, on the ballot. And I remember Chris Alex saying, well, I want to have options. He didn't say he wanted to sell it. And I think that was something that was reiterated by several of the other people here. Just because you have the option to jump out a window 30 stories up doesn't mean you're going to do it. So I think that it's really important to remember where we are in this process. And I really hope that the plan is to see what happens with SIK running the nursing home and see what the options continue to be from there. So that's one thing about information that I think it's important that real, honest information get out in a lot of different ways. Second is just jail information. how many of you realize that the average daily census for the jail for the last few months of last year and beginning of this year was around 170 to 180? It wasn't 200 or 225 or 250 or 282 like the plans in the jail proposal that's been circulated. And also, a number of you are relatively new on the board, and you weren't here back in 2013 when the reports of the Community Justice Task Force and the Institute for Law and Policy Planning were presented to this board. And those reports have lots of information on alternatives to the way that things are done in the criminal justice system in general and in the jail specifically. And those are proposals and suggestions that include a lot of what's becoming standard around the country, like the idea that people don't stay in jail because they can't afford the bail, because people in our country are considered innocent until they're proven guilty. So I would really hope that those of you who come on the board more recently would read at least the executive summaries of those two documents and maybe read into more detail on them as well. And then the third thing is voting information in general. On our recent ballots, the vote on the nursing home tax included all the language that's about PTEL and extending the limit, and it mentioned the total amount of taxes that were going to be collected. It didn't say what was going to be specifically collected for the nursing home. And I understand that that was required by statute. But I also believe that that was in a way that made it so, I mean, who's going to want to vote for something that's worded this way and is this complex? So I don't think that the voters in general really understood what was going on. The voters had the opportunity to give the county board the authority to sell or dispose of the nursing home as an option. And yet it's been talked about as though it's the definite plan. But that was, maybe they thought that's what they were voting for, to tell you all to sell the nursing home. But what they actually were voting for was something just more general, to give the option. Similarly with the county executive office and the option of having a county-wide election for the chair of the county board. And what does home rule mean, and how many people saw that it was there as part of the proposition to establish a county executive? So I think that we really need to find ways to, if we're going to be having the people of Champaign County vote on these things, make sure that they have information to base their votes on. When I lived in California for about 35 years or so, and I think Jack probably will remember this also, that we got a voter's pamphlet with every election, and it included the statements by any candidate who wanted to submit a statement about what they believed in, what their background was. Also, for all of the propositions and referenda, it included a statement in favor of it, a statement against it, and then a rebuttal to the statement in favor and a rebuttal to the statement against it. I really think that we need to find some way of doing that, whether that's in a voter's pamphlet, whether it's information that would be available online, or can it be mailed out with the sample ballots that go to everybody. So those are the things that I'm really concerned about, and I know that you have a lot of decisions to make, and I appreciate the time and energy that you put into it, but I really hope that you'll think about both getting yourselves informed on the issues related to the jail and the nursing home, and also think about how we make the information available to voters. Thank you very much.
Anybody else want to participate in public participation tonight? Seeing none, we'll close that. Are there any communications from the board?
I have one.
Mr. Rosales.
Yes, I wanted to make a public announcement that this year, the 2017 CU Pride Parade will be held on Saturday, September 16th, starting at 4 p.m. at the corner of Walnut and Washington Street in Champaign. I hope that you all could make it and participate and show your support. We'll be there. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, let's move on to Justice and Social Services. Mr. King.
Thank you, Chair. So just have three things to bring forth. The monthly reports. All reports are available on each department's web page through the department reports page. That's Animal Control, Emergency Management Agency, Head Start, Probation and Court Services, and then Veterans Assistance Commission. And so that's just a note there for the monthly reports. And then in other business, we have listed that the semi-annual review of closed session minutes is there. And I guess per the advice of the state's attorney office, I guess move that we keep those minutes closed. Can I have that motion? All right. It's been moved and seconded. Do we need a vote? All right. Okay, so we'll push forward.
You do need a vote,
We do need
just
a
a regular
vote.
voice vote.
Thank you about that. So can we have, I guess, a vote? And thank you. And nays? All right, the ayes have it. Thank you. And then under the chair's report, I do not have anything specific to report, except I do anticipate the Racial Justice Task Force coming forward with their final report soon. So just wanted to make sure to keep that on everyone's radar. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. King. Next up, Policy Personnel and Appointments, Mr. Rosales.
I hope that you all had an opportunity to look over the county clerk's August report, and I would like a motion to place that on file, unless you had a question, the county clerk is here regarding that report. It's okay, moved by Ms. Michaels and Mr. Goss. Seconded. All those in favor? Okay, motion passes. Second is B, is County Administrator, Administrative Services Monthly Report. Unless you all had questions for Rick Snyder, I would like to move to place the August 2017 report on file. Could I get a motion for that? Moved by, who's that? Oh, by Chris Alex, second by Anderson. Okay, all those in favor? Okay, motion passes. Second item on B is request to send proposed Assistant County Administrator and HR Generalist position to Job Content Evaluation Committee. Okay, moved by Asri, second by, who's that? You're pointing? Oh, by Tinsley? All those in favor? Okay, motion passes. What? Question, discussion? Patsy?
During public participation, there was concern expressed about the potential salary or increases or variance on our budget. If our county administrator could speak to that, I'd appreciate it.
I'd be happy to. No, I'll be happy to. The proposed positions are actually, I expect to be budget neutral. The cost for these would be accounted for by the elimination of two positions we currently have open. We've had two administrative assistants that left since I've been here. We have not refilled them. I feel that the resources could be better deployed in terms of having an assistant county administrator and also increasing the responsibilities of one of our staff. Well, essentially, it would be eliminating the executive assistant to the county administrator and replacing it with an HR generalist. I think we're deficient in HR resources right now, and so I think it's a better use of time and also the talents of my current assistant. One other thing, if I may, while I have the mic, is that wanted to point out something in the memo. It was an inadvertent or poor use of words describing some of the necessity for the changes I'm proposing. Didn't mean to either demean or insult anyone in our wonderful information technology organization. Some of this information was previously reported to strategic planning, and there's a line in that report that explicitly says that this is not meant to put down anyone in the organization. I think that what the idea that I'm trying to get across about these positions is that I think that there's a need for people with additional education and experience that can help the county move forward in some of these areas. I know that if we're able to proceed with these, that there will be future requests I will make with respect to information technology. We have a lot of projects down the road that I think are going to benefit from having someone who has very greater depth of experience and also education in those areas. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Patsy, for that. Thank you, Rick. Yes, Pius.
I do have a concern about what it's going to cost us. Not, I know you said they're budget neutral. However, we are trying to save money, and budget neutral doesn't save us money. But I will vote for it because it's just an evaluation. Of course, the real question comes down when what we decide to do with the two positions.
Great, thank you. All those in favor? All those opposed? Okay, motion passes. Item C, other business. There's proposed changes in county board rules, and I will read that to you. Removal of Rule 16.E, point .1, point J, which indicates that any receives and considers for consideration to the county board all grant applications and/or awards for Champaign County offices and agencies. This basically is indicating that all grants that received through the county are channeled through the Finance Committee. And this change would eliminate that it would be through the local committees that we currently are hosting, Social Justice, ELUC, any of the following committees that, out of the 6 that we have, those grants and proposals will be channeled through those committees. So all grants, applications, and awards are routed through the finance, that were routed through the Finance Committee. It will be the removal of this rule would allow grants to go through the committees, which have the more vested interest in the grants. For example, utility efficiency grants go through facilities and services, and justice-oriented grants would go through justices and social justice. So that's the change. Moved by Alex and second by Summers. All those in favor? Okay, I'm sorry. McGuire, you had a question, and then after McGuire, Patsy?
Okay, sorry.
Sorry, I'm all for getting out earlier. But I guess from the explanation, I'm wondering, I do understand wanting to send it through the appropriate committee first, or have an opportunity for the appropriate committee to see it. But the way I understand him saying this, it will never go to the Finance Committee, and I think it should go to the Finance Committee if it's a grant, because it'll impact the budget. Am I reading it wrong, or do I understand it wrong? If Justice and Social Services gets a grant, and they are the only ones that see it, but they don't see the budget implications that it might have. Would you like to address it, please?
Alex, will we be able to?
Yeah, I can speak to that, Jim. My understanding is if there is a grant award that results in a change to the budget, there'd still have to be a budget amendment that went to finance. This is basically the applications for the grants, and we always do an action that like authorizes the application of the grant and authorize acceptance of the grant if we get it. And the thought behind this, and we've been talking about this for years, is that there's really no reason why any of this stuff goes to the Finance Committee, because the actual application for those grants, is not a matter of finance. It's a budget amendment once we actually get the money, so that would still go to finance. And then obviously anything that goes through these other committees will end up at full board anyway. So I actually think it's a streamlining effect. It moves probably some more technical stuff out of the cow and onto the standing committees and puts them in front of people who actually know what they're doing instead of me as finance chair.
Patsy and then Pius.
Well, Jim expressed part of my concern, but the other part of my concern is due to our hybrid structure. Many grants, in theory, could go to ELUC and Highway, and 4 people can vote on that and it be on the consent agendas. So the robustness of it.
It would require a full vote, not 4 votes, just a point of correction. 4 votes does not put it on a consent agenda. Out of
It does if only 4 are at the meeting.
Okay.
And so the robustness of having a discussion at COW is truncated by this new structure. And right now, I can't support this rule change. Thank you.
Okay, Pius, you wanted to add to that?
Well, I just want to point out for one example, if this rule was already in place, or us remove that rule, item E1, E1? Yeah, under the sheriff, that would be discussed under Justice and Social Services. The point is, I don't think we should worry about people are here or not, because committee of the whole, we're missing 2 people tonight too, so that's ridiculous. People are here to vote. If they're not here, they can't vote. I mean, we can't arrange our rules around whether people are here or not. We vote, if we have a quorum, we vote on it. That's the way it goes.
Okay, any further questions? Yes, Ms. Michaels?
Just real quick, Pius, do you remember why it was put in there? Because I think you would have been there before me.
It was Deb Busey's idea, and it turned out
Okay.
it wasn't a good one. That's all.
Ms. Furtado?
Chris was first, I think.
So I just want to make sure that I understand. Is this that they would just go to the various committees for application, and then they would go to finance for appropriation? Or would both of those things be in the special committees?
They'd go to finance for budget amendments.
Okay, so for the actual
Yeah,
appropriation?
yeah,
Okay, so
yeah,
there
which
would,
is typically the acceptance and the appropriation.
I guess I would want finance to be involved, just as somebody who's written a lot of grants in my life. All grants have a budget impact, right? Matching funds, and I do think having sort of that fiscal check before, before it's appropriated, I think is important. Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Alex, you wanted to?
Yeah, I would just add to Ms. Petrie's in partial response to Ms. Petrie's concerns. I acknowledge that the full board, needs to be aware of what's coming in from all the special committees, and any board member who wants to have a discussion at the full board can always pull these off consent. But I would note that I don't remember the last time the discussion on one of these was anything other than aye. So I think this is perfectly reasonable.
Okay, let's go ahead and take a vote. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes. Thank you. Okay. Item 2 in Section C, resolution affirming support for the position of county administrator. Maybe perhaps I should read that for the audience. Resolution states that affirming support for the position of county administrator. Whereas on November 8th, 2016, the voters of Champaign County adopted by referendum the county executive form of government. And whereas the Champaign County Board recognizes the effectiveness, efficient, and reliable execution of the administrative position or administrative function of the county government requires a qualified professional municipal manager accountable to the county board through an employment relation. However, therefore, be it resolved by the Champaign County Board that under the county executive form of government, the county shall continue to engage the services of a professional county administrator with qualifications and compensation comparable to those of the position as it is currently defined. Okay, I got a motion, move to approval by Alex, second by Summers. Discussion, Anderson, and then Alex following.
I'm trying to get my arms wrapped around why we're doing this. I understand there's some concern that who's ever elected to the executive position may not have what you might consider to be qualifications to be of a level that most municipalities may find desirable in an administrator. But I also recognize the executive is a person who's elected themselves, and they would make their own appointment of personnel within the Administrative Services Department. So I guess my question is, does the elected executive have to follow this? And why is the language in here accountable to the county board? Is this person going to be part of administrative services, appointed and working for directly an elected official, that being the executive? Or are they working in some other department for the county board? Thank you.
Any further questions? Pius, would you like to address that?
Hadn't really thought about it, but let me
Okay.
think about it. Mr. Alex has a comment.
Patsy, Goss, and then Alex?
Well, I don't disagree about the importance of having a professional county administrator. So my following comments should not be interpreted in that manner. However, the point is well taken that this is basically gratuitous because we cannot tell succeeding boards what they should be doing. However, if we do want to do something such as this, I move to amend it to include also a director of facilities and a director of planning, because those additional two are just as important for the running of this county as is the county administrator.
Mr. Goss?
Was that a motion? It would need a second.
If that's the motion, and then is there a second on that? Moved by Patsy, second by Max Mitchell. Okay, all those in favor or discussion?
Discussion.
Discussion, McGuire?
Well, I guess this just gets more cloudy and more cloudy as we go along. And I don't even know if the first part has been taken to the state's attorney's office to see if this is even binding. And from the discussion we've had already, I don't think it is. And I don't know that we can bind the county board. We don't even know who's going to be on this county board and when this actually is going to be implemented. So I have the same concerns. I also have the same concern that we're getting ahead of ourselves somewhat in that the voters decided to have a county executive, and now we're getting to that part of the process, and we're deciding and giving them maybe the false hope that all these positions will actually be part of what the county exec and that county board decides will be, who will be working, even though I feel like the people that we have or the positions that she's listed are important positions. I just don't know that putting it down this way and voting and saying that we're going to be able to do that is the correct thing to do. I think the voters created this position because they want someone with vision, they want that person to run, and they can decide through that process of the election what it will be. And I think we diminish that opportunity for them to make that decision when we start deciding through a resolution like this. Thank you.
Any further discussion on that motion? Yes, Mr. Goss.
Well, this is really goes to both of them. Has the state's attorney's office even looked at this in the first place? So I don't think it's all that legal to begin with.
Any further discussion? I don't have an answer on that.
Well, I'd like an answer.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't believe it went to their office. We obviously still have time to do that. Nothing's final at this meeting. This is, in a way, not much different from what Mr. Schneider has recommended for positions in his office, though. Us, as far as we recommend that, but we certainly have time to have it go through the state's have the state's attorney take a look at this.
Yes, Mr. Mitchell.
A few years back, the Champaign County Board of Review was really in a bad spot. And one of the things I think happened was they didn't have anybody in those positions with any professional designations and education in the area that they were working in. And today, there's 3 members, Democrat and Republicans, that are all licensed fee appraisers outside of their job. So what does that do for the county? That allows those people in that position to be able to make statements and to make recommendations with a solid knowledge base because they are professionals. So based upon that, I think that in departments, we really need to see the bar raised so that we do, because we expect a lot from those people, and if they have the educational credentials behind them, that allows them to do their job effectively. Now, the question is, if they are not effective, then there's a choice of being able to continue employment or be relieved. But I think it's a good opportunity, and it also raises the bar from our expectations as well as the citizens of Champaign County.
Any further questions? Patsy and then Pius.
Well, a point of clarification, the things that the county administrator is asking for reevaluation of positions are actions that this board can take and would go into effect with this board. This resolution imposes on the succeeding board, which we really can't do.
Pius? Any summers?
I would actually disagree with you, Ms. Petrie. It reaffirms support for the position of county administrator. Basically, it sets up so that the county executive could hire a county executive. It doesn't say they have to. There's nothing about salary being offered or anything like that. Just it says affirming support for the position of county administrator. So, but on the other hand, we will have them support that, and that's what I see as we're being prepared for that county executive to be able to hire that person if that person wants to. And that's why I think it's a good idea.
Summers.
I just view this resolution with regard to this board. Does this board affirm support for the position of county administrator? And I think that's a question the voters deserve to hear.
Correct me if I'm mistaken, but when we get to the county executive form of government, he will have an administrative budget to deal with, right? I mean, that's at his discretion. He will still have an administrative budget?
He'll have
His or hers?
He'll have there will be a budget. The budget will have to be passed by the county board.
Thank you on that, Stan. Ms. Michaels.
We're speaking to the amendment, which would include not just the administrator, but a director of facilities and director of planning. And I think as this is worded, it says that the board recognizes that the effective, efficient, and reliable execution of the administrative functions of the government requires these qualified professionals. And I think that's maybe something that we table this for later until we get a decision whether this is going to be correct or not. And also, actually, our form of government will actually be changing, and we're not sure what the makeup of that is. Not that I don't support having an administrator or a facilities director or a planning director. I think we just need to be very diligent in the verbiage that we use in a resolution, including these major roles within our government structure.
Alex?
Yeah, I don't intend to support the amendment. I think it muddies what's intended to be largely a symbolic resolution. I'd be happy to speak to the resolution when the main motion is back on the floor.
Any further questions on the second motion of having a director, administrator, planning, director of planning and director of facilities? And that's the motion on the floor. McGuire.
Yes, I just don't intend to vote for either because I don't know that any of this will change. I mean, the structure may not change now or in the future. And why do we need to vote for something that we already have? Why do we have a resolution to do something that we already do and are currently doing. I don't see it as redundant.
Any further questions? Before we do that, is there a friendly motion to defer? Okay, so let's go with having a director of administrator, planning director, and facilities director, which the motion stands as the way it's written, and adding these individuals on there. All those in favor? Oh, roll call?
Furtado?
No.
Goss?
No.
Harper? Hartke?
No.
King?
Yes.
Marsh? McGuire? Michaels? Mitchell? Patterson?
No.
Petrie?
Yes.
Rector? Rosales?
No.
Summers? Tinsley?
No.
Alex? Anderson? Clemens? Cowart? Cruz? Esri?
No.
Weibel?
Motion. What are the numbers? I think it might have failed, but let's see the numbers on that.
17 to 3.
17 to 3, motion fails. Now we go to the original motion, resolution number 10, which I read for you. And let's have a vote on that. Oh, discussion, again, okay. Alex?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of comments. This is indeed a vote for the status quo, which I understand is kind of strange. It's also largely symbolic. I would disagree that that the issue of binding future boards is a problem, because I would point out that this board is the board that will pass the budget for the year that will include the county administrator's salary or not. So it is a matter for this board to take up. Now, it's perhaps a bit premature, but the reason I wanted to bring this up now was because we have candidates filing for these positions, and I think it is important to send a message to someone who's considering running for this position, whether this county board is committed to the idea of having a professional administrator in the office to work beside the county executive, or whether this board believes that the county executive should be essentially on his or her own and should be expected to perform the functions that are currently performed by the county administrator. And if you give me a few minutes here, I'd like to say some things that I think may have slipped through the cracks as we consider this county executive role, which, quite frankly, I can't answer most of the questions that have been asked about, nor can anybody else, because the state statute is clear as mud on all the responsibilities for this person. So there's going to be a process that this board will have to go through to figure out questions about very minor things like, who does the county administrator work for? And does the county executive hire the county administrator? Does the county board hire the county administrator? Who signs the contracts? I mean, there's a lot of things that I think we'll have to work out, and I think we'll be able to do that amenably. Clearly, the county executive we're going to have one, but I don't understand everything that it means, and so I would ask you to view this resolution sort of as a way to at least put a stake in the ground and say maybe what we believe the county executive isn't. So just a couple of things. I want to talk about how the county administrator was selected. I want to talk about the risk of not having one, and I want to talk about what the county board needs to move forward. So obviously, in late 2015, Deb Busey retired, or announced her intent to retire, and we formed a search committee, and there were 10 members on that search committee. It was myself, James Quisenberry was the chair, Jack Anderson, John Schrader, Patsy Petrie. We had the Chief Deputy Auditor Ramsey, State's Attorney Reitz, County Clerk Holton, Sheriff Walsh, and of course, County Administrator Deb Busey was all on this committee. And by consensus, we established a list of requirements and qualifications that we were looking for in the position of county administrator. And I won't take the board's time to read them, but if you look at the bottom of your packet, you'll have a copy of the search memo that went out, the press release, and the basically the recruitment profile that went out saying sort of what we were looking for in this position. And we had 25 applicants that got through the initial screening. We had 8 who we phone interviewed. We got down to 4 finalists, one of whom withdrew. And we did we picked 3 for extensive in-person interview sessions, meetings with community stakeholders, and a public meet and greet. I would note that one finalist was Chief Deputy Sheriff Jones, who is now, as I understand it, running for sheriff. I think somebody like Mr. Jones exemplifies many of the things we want to see in a public servant and a candidate, and I expect him to be an excellent sheriff. But I think it is significant that he was the only finalist for this job from Champaign County, and that the committee ended up going outside the county to select Mr. Snyder, whose qualifications and experience the committee believed were a better fit. That's not to say that there aren't people in Champaign County qualified for the job of county administrator, but it does indicate that qualified municipal administrators don't exactly grow on trees, or perhaps it would be more appropriate to say corn stalks or bean plants. Everyone on that committee and everyone on this board recognized at that time how critical it is to have an accountable professional administrator with the right experience, education, and skills. Adding a county executive does not change that. As we look forward to the 2018 county executive election, I'd like us to remember two things. First, although we appear to have two strong candidates, this may not always be the case. When it comes down to it, the requirements for becoming county executive are getting a couple hundred petition signatures and being the member of the party who in a given election year has voters the most angry about what's going on in Springfield and Washington and gets people to show up at the polls. That time-honored means of selecting our representatives does not lend itself to outcomes like that achieved by the County Administrator Search Committee when it comes to hiring professionals. Second, I'm fairly certain that neither of the currently announced candidates would have been the consensus choice of the County Administrator Search Committee. That doesn't mean that they aren't qualified to be county executive, but it does mean that they don't have the specific qualifications and experience that the committee identified as being ideal for a county administrator. So what's the difference between the county administrator and the county executive? Well, I hope that even my colleagues who support the idea of the county executive understand that it's a political and a policy-making position. In fact, that appears to be the whole point, to have one individual who can stand on an equal footing with other local municipal executives, mayors and village presidents, and act as an advocate and a policy leader for Champaign County. It is not an administrative position. On the same ballot where voters approved the executive, far more of them approved a countywide elected board chair. The state's attorney's opinion is that the executive takes precedence, but we can draw conclusions from the outcome of that vote. I believe that voters understand the difference between a mayor and a city manager. I believe they understand the difference between a school board president and a superintendent of schools. One is a citizen legislator, the other is a professional manager, and the vast majorities of cities and towns and school districts have one of each. I hope they also understand the difference between a county executive and a county administrator. One is a politician that has an ideology and an agenda and helps drive policy. The other is a professional who implements the policies adopted by the executive and the board, and one is not a replacement for the other. So what happens if we don't have an administrator? Well, I think there's some risks. One risk is lack of accountability. If Mr. Snyder were to leave, we could replace him through the same search process by which we hired him. If Mr. Snyder were to stop showing up for work or start breaking the law, we could fire him with cause. It's in his contract. The key word there being contract. No matter what happens, we can promise the taxpayers that there will always be someone in the county administrator's office who is qualified to handle the business of the county on a daily basis, because without that, the county grinds to a halt. Unfortunately, most of us have learned the limitations of this board in terms of dealing with an elected official. We can't make them show up, we can't make them work, and as we know, we can't even keep them from collecting their paycheck if they aren't showing up for work. I'd like to think this will never happen with a county executive, but forever is a long time. At some point, we may have to deal with an executive who leaves or becomes unable to do the job or isn't doing the job. You could say this is true for any elected official, and you'd be right, but all of the other countywide officials have an assistant or a chief deputy with the qualifications and experience to oversee the day-to-day operations of their office. Without a county administrator, the county executive has no backup, and the board has no one to rely on if and when a future executive candidate doesn't do the job. Another risk is lack of continuity. Certainly, county administrators will come and go, just as county executives will come and go, but ideally they won't come and go at the same time. A professional county administrator acts as a source of institutional knowledge and understands how to document and preserve that knowledge across election cycles when the executive may change hands. I would finally argue that the largest risk goes to the integrity of the county board itself. Whether we're Democrats or Republicans, I hope we can all agree that the citizens whose party is in the minority on the county board and the citizens whose party doesn't hold the county executive seat are nonetheless entitled to informed representation from their county board members. For that to happen, we need objective, accurate information. I can't imagine county board members under the executive system being able to do their jobs, which incidentally will sometimes include having to decide whether or not to override vetoes by the county executive, if their only source of information is the county executive, a politician with an agenda and an ideology and a compelling reason to want board members to see their side of the story. One of the most significant issues we've been facing is the long-term future of the county nursing home. Regardless of your position on that issue, I hope you'll acknowledge that every decision we've made with regard to the nursing home has been based on information, scenarios, and options provided by and recommendations made by county administrators. This is true for nearly every other issue this board has faced. The information that Ms. Busey and Mr. Snyder have brought to this board has been objective, nonpartisan, non-political, and intended to help each of us as county board members make the best decisions we could based on what we believe to be in the best interest of our constituents. Future county boards will have the same obligations and the same needs. In conclusion, we'll likely have to disagree on the merits of the county executive form of government. But for all the reasons I just explained, I believe it is not simply practical to envision operating Champaign County on a day-to-day basis without a professional employed county administrator. I think if this board were to attempt to do so in 2019, it would quickly learn this the hard way, and I hope it doesn't come to that. Groups which promoted the county executive referendum appear to have done so based on the assumption that adding the executive position would allow the county to eliminate the administrator position. I contend that this was an assumption based neither on an understanding of the role of the county administrator nor on the experience of the one other county in the state which has implemented this form of government. It is also not an assumption that I've heard expressed by either of the two announced candidates for the office of county executive. Attempting to make this assumption look responsible after the fact is no reason to risk the ability of the county to execute its administrative responsibilities with efficiency and professionalism. So I ask my colleagues on this board to recognize the significant differences between the political office of county executive and the professional position of county administrator. I ask you to acknowledge the many risks of attempting to view the one as a replacement for the other. And I ask you to support this resolution, providing at least some reassurance to voters and taxpayers that regardless of who we choose in 2018 and beyond to serve as county executive, the day-to-day business of the county will continue to be taken care of by a qualified, professional, and accountable county administrator. And I appreciate your time and would add that this is largely symbolic. It does not bind future boards, but I would believe it's our opportunity to say that we understand that adding a political position in the county executive, for better or for worse, is not a substitute for having somebody who has the qualifications and skills that this county executive search committee sought out less than 2 years ago. So appreciate you listening.
Thank you very much, Alex, for that historical overview of the positions of the executive administrator as well as the county administrator. Anderson.
Thank you. Mr. Alex's comments were very good, and I appreciate the review. What I think about when I look at this resolution is, first off, it's not binding. We know that. The words say that this administrator will be accountable to the county board. I'm not sure how that can even be when they're actually appointed by or selected by an elected official. We have other county elected members in this, in the county, the sheriff, the treasurer, the clerk, and they do have chief deputies, key personnel, they're number 2. But there's no resolution requiring that they have one. Why would we do that for this position of a county executive? The county executive will be elected by the voters and with the expectation that they'll do their job. In all likelihood, if they don't have the qualifications, if they don't, they might, but if they don't, they'll hire a chief, an administrator. And they'll have to figure out how to do that within their own budget. Whether we provide it as a board going into that budget cycle, or whether they have to ask the new board for budget adjustment. I just don't feel comfortable telling an elected official that they have to have a second in command. I think that's for them to decide what is best. We don't do it with any other of our other elected officials here in the county. Why would we do it with this one? Thank you.
Alex, any further questions after Alex?
I guess just briefly to speak to that, Jack, I appreciate your position. It is not at all clear to me, reading the statute, whether or not it precludes the county board from hiring a county administrator. I mean, currently the county administrator works for the county board. They have a contract with the county board. The county executive adds another elected position, which has veto power of the county board and has considerable responsibilities spelled out, some of which are, it has significant responsibilities spelled out in the statute. But I see nowhere in the statute that says that we are not free to interpret this broadly in terms of how we implement it, which is basically what Will County did. And my understanding is what I'm proposing is something somewhat similar to what they have in Will County. Pius can disagree with me on that. But it was my intent in this resolution, the reason it says answerable to the county board is it was my intent that this county board employ the county administrator. Feel free
Pius?
to not support it based on that grounds, but that was not a mistake.
Pius, you had additional comments?
I can tell you what Will County does. Right now, they have a chief of staff under the county executive, which would be equivalent to the county administrator. I think the county board also has a chief of staff. So they have two chiefs of staff. Clearly, one's accountable to the county board, one's accountable to the county executive. There is a line in here. We could see what the state's attorney says about that. We could have them resolve that problem if this makes it to the county board meeting.
Anybody that hasn't had a turn before we go to McGuire? Patterson?
I just had a question for Pius. What is the, how do they operate with two chiefs of staff, one for the executive, one for the county board? Do they split responsibilities? How does that work out?
Well, the county board chief of staff is in charge of things for basic policy issues that come to the board, and obviously the chief of staff for the executive does the day-to-day operations. That's in general. I don't know the details what they all do, but that's how it was described to me, and it seems like that's what they do.
Anybody that hasn't had an opportunity to speak to this issue before we go to McGuire? Stephanie?
I appreciate your summary as well. And for me, when we deferred the question about the county executive a month, the reason was to clarify what our expectations were, and central to that was the role of the county administrator. That was one of the main questions. And so I think this gives us the opportunity to do that, to signal what the expectations are. And that was one of that's the reason I voted for that, right, was to give us that time to sort of clarify that. And I think that this is an attempt to do that. And I think it's an important attempt to do that.
Jim?
Sure. I guess first, quick answers. Will County's significantly larger than we are, and we won't necessarily do the same things. They have more money, those types of resources. Secondly, it's the voters that decided to have this position, and what we're doing is deciding by these discussions before them what the county exec will be doing, whether I assume no one's said that they won't have the county administrator, but also determining what kind of responsibilities they're having based on what Will County's doing. All of these discussions that we're having are really what the voters should have an opportunity to decide the vision of the county exec should be. Not here. We're limiting something which obviously everybody said we can't do. We're deciding for them what they might want to do through the election, whatever issues, whatever vision for their families in this county, that candidate will carry, and what those voters will decide for. We don't have to decide for them. And then when we do have a county exec, we do have the county board, they'll determine what the makeup of what the county exec will do, whether they hire a staff or whether we allow them to have a staff, whether the county administrator will work for the county or not. That's what will happen. But it'll be a discussion during the election. The voters will decide, just like they decided to have a county executive. It's not up to us. We can talk about it, but we should give them the opportunity to decide.
Any further comments or questions before we do a roll call? Yes, Patsy.
Right now, I am going to vote no pending what we hear from the state's attorney. I appreciate what Ms. Furtado mentioned or reminded us of, and I don't think we have the clarification we need to appropriately decide one way or the other on that. So I heard the two of you whispering in that you think maybe you'll have a chance to get an opinion from the state's attorney by the county board meeting.
Point of information, if it doesn't pass here, there's no reason to get an opinion.
Yeah.
pointing that out. It has to pass to get to the county board if we want to get an opinion.
Okay, Patterson?
Kind of to what Pius' point said, if it doesn't pass, we're not going to get an opinion. So if you vote no, that's your intention for it to be defeated. So if you want an opinion, I don't understand why you'd vote no. And I'm usually very supportive of seeking the opinion of the state's attorney's office on things like this. But it's my understanding that this is not an action, it's a statement. And the idea, if I'm misinterpreting Mr. McGuire's words, he can clarify, but from what I took, what he said is that the platform and the proposed structure of the candidates will put to what they envision for the office, the voters will get to decide through that means. And yeah, that's how it all works. And what we're doing right now is on action. It's making a statement. And just because the voters haven't voted either way, assuming that the candidates are going to differ, which the only two candidates now aren't, this is just a statement. And, you know, before we passed a resolution, or before the voters passed a referendum giving us the ability to sell the nursing home, plenty of people felt very comfortable making their statements on how they felt on that issue. So I don't think that we're bound by waiting to see what the voters say before we say what we stand for. You know, everybody in this room is elected. Actually, that's not true. Sorry, Stephanie. Costs. But the point is that I'm just kind of stunned that anybody in this room would suggest that we're not all very much in favor at every opportunity to express our own opinions. I mean, that's why we're here, right?
Rector?
I'm stunned we've wasted 30 minutes on this.
Not a waste.
Maybe you said it, Mr. Alex, but I didn't hear it. I didn't hear anything about the mayoral aldermanic form of government in Urbana, where the mayor over there decides whether she wants a chief of staff or administrator. This is the same model. You mentioned nonpartisanship by Ms. Busey and Mr. Snyder, and I agree. And you guys, the Dems, are turning this totally into a partisan thing tonight. The local people are tired of partisanship. The state people are tired of it. They want us to do the right thing. I like you, Chris, and you can sit there and make faces all day. You can make faces all day. You guys are turning this into a partisanship thing again, and we spent 30 minutes, and it's going to come down to party lines, and people need to start doing the right thing instead of what partisanship is.
Yes, Harkey.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by the accusation that when this goes down party lines, that's only one party's fault.
Anderson?
Hey, it's my opinion.
Order, please.
Yeah, look, I don't know why we need to voice our thought on this and pass some resolution. It's not going to be binding to anyone. And secondly, we don't even know if it hasn't been vetted through or legally. It's not that Ms. Petrie was trying to, at the end of the day, Mr. Patterson said, look, if you're going to not vote for this, then you just want to defeat it. It's not what she wants to defeat the resolution. She wants to feel comfortable with a legal opinion. She made that clear. And if I misinterpreted that response, I'm sorry, but that's what I heard. We just need to, I'm not going to support this for a variety of reasons I've already mentioned, and I would like the legal clearance. But even if I got the legal clearance, I see it as totally unnecessary.
Could I get a roll call, please? Let's move on. Could we get a roll call, please? Pardon? Okay. I moved to get a roll call, but I guess I can't move, so Mr. Goss?
Okay, I call for the question.
Okay. Second? Summers? All those in favor? Aye, okay. Now could we get a roll call?
To call for the question.
Patterson?
Can I call for a roll call?
Yes?
Second?
Okay, I heard a motion and a second by King.
Point of order, it's not a motion, you just need two people to ask for it.
Okay, so we asked, could we get a roll call from the clerk?
Furtado.
Yes.
Goss.
No.
Harper.
No.
Hardkey.
Yes.
King.
Yes.
McGuire. Michaels. Mitchell. Patterson.
Yes.
Petrie.
Yes.
Rector. Rosales.
Yes?
Summers. Tinsley.
Yes.
Alex. Anderson. Clemens. Cowart. Esri.
No.
Weibel.
Yes. Passes.
12-8.
12-8, motion passes. Thank you. Yes. a
Yeah, I just want to
for
comment, it's
Pius?
not unusual for resolutions that have not gone through the state's attorney at the committee level, so that does happen, and we'll have them review it and when it comes to the county board. Thank you.
Okay, semi-annual review of closed session minutes. I just moved to place that on file.
I move to keep the minutes closed.
Okay, second, by Harking, moved by Pius. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Okay, we place those on file. There is no chair's report for today, but I did county board appointments expiring October 31st, 2017. There are none. Designated items to be placed on the consent agenda is B2, C1, and C2.
B2 doesn't go on the agenda, that's committee level.
Okay. So I repeat, consent agenda will have C1 and C2, not B.
Yeah, C2 is done, yeah, no, just C1.
No, C1 wasn't consent.
You're right, you're correct. None of them. None of them on consent.
None of them are consent
Yep.
agendas because people voted against them.
Okay. So, all of them will be on the regular agenda at the next board meeting. That'll be B2, C1, and C2 will be on the agenda, not on the consent agenda. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Alex, you ready to deal with mobile homes?
I am.
And finance?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, but first I'm ready to deal with the treasurer if he is here tonight, which he is not. So I would ask, without objection, we will receive the treasurer's report and place it on file. And if you want to look at it, it is on the treasurer's website. Okay, we'll do that. We have a cash flow projection report presentation that is also included in the packet, so you're welcome to review that. And without objection, we'll place that on file. And we'll move on. May I have a motion approving sending to the full board with recommendation for approval in omnibus fashion, items 3 and 4, resolution authorizing the cancellation of appropriate certificate of purchase on a mobile home, permanent parcel 29-50-137 and 15-25-501. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. You have a similar motion for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 through 17. A resolution authorizing the execution of a deed of conveyance on the county's interest or cancellation of the appropriate certificate of purchase on real estate for the permanent parcel numbers as indicated in the agenda. Moved by Ms. Michaels and seconded by Mr. Goss, I heard. Oh, sorry. So, Ms. Petrie, yes, go ahead.
Since these are legal transactions, do they individually need to be read into the record?
In recognition of Ms. Petrie's comment, I would note that the parcel numbers for these are 20-09-01-180-002, 21-34-33-429-017, 42-20-12-127-015, 01-35-30-231-008, 02-01-31-177-001, 02-01-31-178.002, 02-01-36-480-009, 06.12.04.352.002, 20.09.02.103.012, 20.09.02.227.029, 21-34-34-302-008, 26-30-08-283-012, and last but not least, 26-30-09-165-002. Now, is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. That motion carries. May I have a resolution in omnibus fashion authorizing the county board chair to sign a mobile home tax sale certificate of purchase for permanent parcel 11-014-0039, 14-020-0165, 14-023-0035, and 30-058-0082. Moved by Mr. Esri, second by who? Mr. Summers. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. And finally, may I have a motion recommending authorizing the execution of a deed of conveyance of the county's interest to cancellation of the appropriate certificate of purchase on real estate for permanent parcel 19-27-33-451-005. Moved by Mr. Goss. May I have a second? Mr. King. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Move on to the auditor. The auditor is not here tonight. We will accept his report and place it on file, as well as the update with regard to the Champaign County Nursing Home accounts payable. As promised, our next item is item G1. May I have a motion to send to the full board with a recommendation for approval the salary for the county executive for the elected term beginning December 1, 2018.
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Michaels, seconded by Mr. Goss. And to remind the board, this is currently we've seen this several times now, and it is currently set at $117,000. Mr. Harkey.
Yes, I'd like to offer an amendment to change this to $70,000.
That was seconded by Ms. Furtado. We'll take up the amendment. Any discussion on the amendment? Mr. Harkey would like to speak to that.
Point of information?
Yes,
This
sir.
for all 4 years?
$70,000 for all 4 years with 0% raises.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Harkey. Any discussion on the amendment? Mr. McGuire, I think it's you down there,
Yes.
right? Okay.
From the discussion we've been having tonight, we seem to maybe see the administrator's position, which is an important position, as something less or more significant than the county executive. And that's kind of my concern. And now we come to the salary portion, and we want to lower the salary instead of pay the position what it should be paid, and value the position for its responsibilities. I have a statement I want to read, one that we've put out before. The Republican Caucus Champaign County Board is committed to giving the elected county executive a budget that does not exceed the current budget amount for the administrative department. The caucus is also committed to provide the county executive with a salary commensurate with the other elected positions managing a large number of employees. It will be up to the executive to manage the administrative functions of the county consistent with the standards required by the citizens within the budget approved by the county board. It is our goal to continue to manage taxpayer monies in a conservative, responsible manner. You know, the voters have provided this position to see the county move forward in a strong way. And this person will have, whoever it is, and I think both candidates are good candidates on either side, and they have a lot of responsibility, whether there's an administrator there or not, and they need to be paid appropriately. I've done a lot of negotiating contracts, and in that everybody sees it as, from their perspective, of what like people say, whether you support the exec or not, that person's going to go in there, and we need somebody, and they need to be paid for their responsibilities with the number of employees we have here, with the budget that they have there. It's about where the county goes, what vision the voters have for the county, and what we have to do. As the rural areas grow, as the community expands, as we hope the airport expands and railroads expand, and the things we have the elected official, executive move forward, we want to see that done appropriately. We want to see that person held in the right position and the right pay as they go to Springfield or they go to Washington, D.C. to fight for this county. And to diminish this position with a lower wage, lower salary, because we think it's a part-time position, doesn't hurt the position. It hurts the county and the people that live here and the voters. So we'll vote no for this. I'll support the original salary. We want to see the county move forward into the future. And that's what this position is about. Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to build on that. Chairman Weibel, along with Assistant S.A. Davis, put together a pretty complete memo of what they see as likely duties and responsibilities. There's 36 items on here. Now, this is a daunting task. It also speaks to the fact of needing help, because there's no way one single person's going to be able to do every single one of these things. So this list is very complete. It's a very full job. It's something that the voters are going to hold this person accountable to do, and they're going to elect the right person. Thank you, Chairman.
Couldn't see which you guys fight it out, which one of you was first. Mr. Patterson, then Mr. Anderson, sorry.
There's been a lot of talk tonight about what the voters wanted. The referendum language, hopefully the clerk can correct me if I'm wrong, but as I recall, the referendum language was, shall Champaign County adopt the executive form of government and not become home rule? That's one sentence, 2 clauses. There's nothing in there about how the voters said, oh, we should pay this person 6 figures and not have an administrator. In fact, there wasn't a whole bunch of debate on this issue, but one of the loudest things that were said by the supporters who pushed this, who continue to say that when they came to our meeting last month, is that this will be a budget-neutral system. And this idea that the best form of government is one in which we have politicians do the work of professionals, I can't really believe what I'm hearing. We're telling voters that the best form of government is when we pay the politicians more money. It's a tough job. We need to pay somebody a lot to do it. There's a lot of young men and women who risk their lives in the military for peanuts. We had a gentleman come in here last month talking about his buddy lost his legs for $25,000 a year. And we're going to sit here and say, in order to get people to serve this community, we got to pay them 6 figures. I think that's ridiculous. I don't think any, I'd be curious to see a poll of what the voters think on that. That in order to have the best government, we need to pay the politicians more money.
Are you done, Mr. Patterson? Okay. Mr. Anderson.
Thank you. If I had a serious operation coming up because of a medical illness, I'd want to pay the doctor who could do the job the amount that they deserve. And I would hope that I could attract somebody with the money I could afford to pay them, especially if I had to pay most of it out of pocket. These analogies of soldiers just don't fly. At the end of the day, if we don't offer a salary to an executive who is competent, who would actually want to have the job, because we're competing against other municipalities or other potential jobs they could take. If we're going to lowball them with some smaller, lesser amount, then we can expect potentially people who really aren't qualified for the job. I guess we could say, well, hey, but we do have a resolution that says even though you're not qualified, we'll make sure you have a administrator who is. I don't, at the end of the day, if this county executive is not successful because the only applicants we get for election are those willing to accept lesser, and they're not successful, then I guess you blame the board, because we didn't offer a salary that was commensurate with the responsibilities, the education and experience required that we're seeking for that position in that office. Thank you.
Anybody else before we go back to Mr. Patterson? Who's that? Maybe you've spoken yet. Mr. Stan. Trying to come up with your last name, Stan. It's Mr. Harper, and then we'll go to Mr. Patterson if we didn't get anything else.
In my house, Chris, I've been called a lot of things, so. I've sat here roughly 5 years now, and a lot of us have, some new. And like I told our caucus, I'd like to take a moment and talk about what we've accomplished in the 5 years I've been here. Didn't take long, did it? I don't disagree with what Chris is saying. When I was first approached about this county executive position, I said the same thing. It's a political deal. And we're all sitting here, and I know I've talked to Mr. Summers. Probably mentioned it to Kyle and a few of my other colleagues. There are some decisions made at this county 15, 20 years ago that are costing us financially, and we have to fix it. The 22 of us here. We weren't around, none of us were there when those decisions were made. Things like a $7.5 million highway building. I've been around shop maintenance facilities my whole life. That was stupid. And I will say, and I know Kyle, Josh, the nursing home should have never been built. They had a perfectly good home in the 1970 part, which could have been added on to, but instead they built a new nursing home in the lowest hole of Champaign County. Walk out the backside of this building, you're still looking out over the top of our nursing home. When they left that nursing home, they left two 1900 buildings, the year 1900, that are condemned at this point, which would probably cost us $1 million or better to tear down with the asbestos and everything. They walked away and left it. They are condemned buildings. We will probably have to knock part of a wall out and block it off so we do not have air contamination into the old nursing home, which Ilias rents. For that reason, I am supporting the county executive and the $117,000, because either candidate, we need leadership. We're sitting here butting heads, and it wasn't our fault. Any of the 22 of us sitting here, we had nothing to do with that. But until we face the facts that we have to fix it, we will get nowhere. So, thank you.
I move a roll call, please. Noted. Ms. Petrie, did you speak already? Sorry. Okay, go ahead, Ms. Petrie.
This will take a few minutes because I've been wrestling with this for a long time and trying to figure out how to analyze this situation. First of all, the elected county executive, I didn't support, that's why I got the other resolution on the ballot, but statute trumped us, so we have it, and we have to do the best we can for the citizens of this county who elected all of us for the remainder of the time that's on there. I'm sure there will be an opportunity to vote on whether it should be rescinded or not, but we can't talk about that now. We have to talk about what we have for this situation. I look at this, and we've done this sort of backwards, and I said this once before. We should have had the conversation in May as to what we're thinking about in relationship to this new role and the rest of the roles in the county. But we didn't do it, so now it's a situation of personality and politics, and I do agree with the comment that we can't put it back in the bottle, but I've tried to set it aside. So as an urban planner, I've looked at this. What do we have? We have an elected county executive. What do we need? The best things for this county. And the last question urban planners always ask is how do we go about getting it? That's one of the reasons that I made the amendment to Chris's resolution, because I think it's very important for the county. We've got to cope with this elected official. We really needed a county administrator. We need a good facility person. Heaven knows we need a good facility person. And we need a good person in planning and zoning. We have to figure out how we do all four of them. We have a lot of things on our plate. Mr. Harper just enumerated many of them. We're in this situation because of backward decision-making on previous boards on both sides of the aisle. It isn't one party or the other. This has been going on since the downtown jail situation. And it's stupid. And we're doing stupid again. And we should be looking at this in relationship to how can we move this county forward. The way I figure it, we have very important decisions to be made, laying the groundwork for them probably in the next 4 years, and it'll take the next 6, a decade, to straighten all this out. That's in the reports we've had on maintenance on the buildings, that's reports on the nursing home, that's reports on the jail. We can go on and on and on. We have a library full of reports, and for us to sit here and batter over what we want to pay people to have quality people moving this county forward. And in 7 years on this board, somebody asked me what we've accomplished. We haven't accomplished a whole lot because we haven't moved ourselves forward. This salary, the amendment salary, is too low to assure for us that anybody elected into this office takes this office seriously, sees this as a full-time job, and needs to move forward for the county.
Josh, you have not spoken yet, so go ahead.
Yeah, and Gordy, don't quote me on this, but I think we do have 2 very qualified people running for this office, and we haven't even set the salary yet. So I think the idea that this is only dependent on salary, quality people is a farce. And I would point out, Ms. Petrie, you thought this salary was fine last week because you made a point in a newspaper article of claiming how the $70,000 was your motion. Well, and that did not pass, but you did vote for the $70,000. I guess you changed your mind in the last week. So I hope we can move forward and actually at least get this vote cast.
Mr. Mitchell.
You know, over the past month, I've received a few emails, and it's been said that that was a concerted effort by certain individuals to tilt the numbers and opposing the salary. Well, I look at that they're citizens of Champaign County. Also, some of them, I recognize their name. Some of them included their street addresses, which happened to fall into District 5 of the Champaign County Board. So, you have to look at that those people took the time to write and oppose the salary that's been proposed. Next is, I'm out and about a lot, and I would say that because this is on the table, I only wish that Panera Bread had a drive-up. Why? Because I go in there wanting to get a little cinnamon charge and a cup of coffee. I don't come out of there with a cinnamon charge and a cup of coffee. I come out with my head beat because I've been talked to by people who live in my neighborhood opposing the salary. I say that our county is fraught with a lot of problems. We have a nursing home that we're needing to dig deeper and deeper and deeper. If we don't sell it, we're going to continue to dig deeper and deeper. So I guess it's an individual thing. If we do want it, maybe 117 isn't enough. Maybe 150, maybe 175. Let's satisfy the need of people that if they need that kind of money to live on, let's support it. But you know what? I've been in the community, and the people that have talked to me didn't say we need you to support 117. They opposed it, and they opposed it strongly.
Mr. McGuire.
Well, thank you. And, you know, that's an interesting conversation. I appreciate that, Max. Costs are always an issue in anything that we do. And from my experience, comparables are always an issue in this discussion. You know, there was a position open in the city for a neighborhood services director. That's just doesn't have anything like the responsibility this position will have, and it had a salary of $117,000. We at the county, and this has been brought up many times, don't pay what other units of government in this county pay. We pay significantly less. We're very lucky to keep someone like the treasurer for 42 years and what we're paying them. We're very lucky to keep the staff that we have for what we pay them. And now what we're talking about is trying to have someone who's going to lead this county into the future. And it is comparable to the sheriff's wages and the other administrators. And I haven't had the people come up and complain about it, but I have had a significant number of people vote for the county executive's position and want to support it and want to see it do it well. So if I have a position that I want to bargain for, or I want to make sure it has the right compensation level and maintain it and make sure I get someone qualified and isn't being paid part-time, I make sure I pay them appropriately because I want to be successful. Because if the voters want it that way, that's what I want to do, is fulfill their need, their decision.
Anybody else on the amendment, the Harkey amendment for 70,000? And I will remind everybody that this is going to certainly not be on the consent agenda, so whatever happens, we'll get to do this again next week. Any further comments or questions? We have had a call for a roll call. I'll mention how I'm going to vote on this in case anybody cares. I appreciate pretty much everything everybody said here. I think this, if we're going to have this executive position, it should be successful. I also note what other positions, okay, and again, we're getting to this, right? I look at what the mayor of Urbana makes, which is also a full-time position, and that's $61,000 or something like that. So I actually think 70 is reasonable, and maybe not for the reason you think. I think it's a salary that is enough to get someone who does have another job within the community, somebody who's an attorney, somebody who's a professional and involved with a professional firm, the incentive to spend a significant portion of their time in this job for the county, yet it's also high enough that it could be a full-time job for somebody who wanted to be a full-time job. I understand certainly, I mean, I'll be real honest, I would not take this job for $70,000 a year. I don't think I'd take this job for $115,000 a year. But I'm going to support the 70 amendment, and we'll see what happens, because I think that's a reasonable compromise between, you know, the 30 and what was talked about initially. The minimum is they have to make, what, half as much as a Champaign County board member, which would be about $4,000 a year. Obviously, we're not going to get anybody for that. I will notice the positions like the mayor of Urbana have never been never gone uncontested or unfilled for lack of interest. So I think it's a reasonable compromise, and I'll vote for it. We'll see what happens. That being said, will the clerk please call the roll? We're voting on the amendment to change from 117 to 70. So if you want 70, vote yes. If you don't want 70, vote no, and we go back to the 117 and start again.
Furtado?
Yes.
Goss?
No.
Harper?
No.
Hardkey?
Yes.
King?
Yes.
McGuire.
No.
Michaels.
No.
Mitchell. Patterson.
Yes.
Petrie.
No.
Rector.
No.
Rosales.
No.
Summers.
Yes.
Tinsley.
Yes.
Alex.
Yes.
Anderson.
No.
Clemens.
No.
Cowart. Esri.
No.
Weibel.
Yes.
9/11.
Which way?
9
Motion,
yes.
motion fails. Okay.
Motion fails.
Thank you for your, I can't count that high. We're back to the main motion on the floor, which is the county executive salary at $117,000 a year. Any discussion on that? Mr. Tinsley?
Motion for roll call.
Second.
We will have a roll call. Anybody want to speak to this? Let's get right on it. Call the roll, please.
No. Oh, sorry. Well, I know I'm first. I know I'm first.
So glad you're listening.
Furtado.
No.
Goss.
Yes.
Harper.
Yes.
Hartke.
No.
King.
No.
McGuire.
Yes.
Michaels.
Yes.
Mitchell. Patterson.
No.
Petrie.
Yes.
Rector.
Yes.
Rosales.
Yes.
Summers.
No.
Tinsley.
No.
Alex.
No.
Anderson.
Yes.
Clemens.
Yes.
Cowart. Esri.
Yes.
Weibel.
No.
11-9, yes.
Thank you. Motion carries. We'll go to full board with a recommendation for approval. Moving on, may I have an amendment, or may I have a motion on budget transfer 17-4 from Department 476. This is $1,282 of additional appropriation for the Workman's Compensation Insurance Actuarial Study Fee. Moved by, what's your name? Moved by Mr. Esri, seconded by Mr. Goss. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Move on to budget. May I have a motion on budget amendment 17-36? Yeah, we'll get to that. May I have a discussion on, motion on budget amendment 17-36, $4,786 of increased appropriations offset by $4,786 of increased revenue to cover the shared cost of the Cisco router necessary to implement the internet sharing agreement with the city of Urbana and the Urbana Free Library. Moved by Mr. Rector, seconded by Mr. King. Any discussion? Anybody want to know what this is? I think we talked about this agreement at the last meeting, so you probably all know what this is. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. And finally, may I have a motion for budget amendment 17-37, increased appropriations of $105,000, increased revenue of $105,000 for the even years of the operation of the Workforce Development Program. Moved by Mr. McGuire down there. May I have a second? Seconded by Chair Weibel. Discussion, questions, comments? Mr. King.
Is this a, I guess, a community-based program? Is it for the children, or is this, tell me a little bit more.
This is administered by the Regional Planning Commission, by Parkland, and the state, and it's essentially a sort of an umbrella skills development, work skills development training program. I think at one point it was operated by Parkland, and then the RPC was involved later. You're testing. what I
Actually, it was
remember
independent.
here. Okay, but it's now, it's the Regional Planning Commission, it's Parkland.
Yeah.
And it's the Department of, it's a couple of state
IDS and,
departments.
yeah,
sorry.
there's 4 listed there. It's the Work Tech Center. And it's mostly for adults. They do have a summer program for younger people.
The deeper you dig, the less I know. Any discussion or comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. I'll move on to item E1 for the sheriff. May I have a motion to send to the full board with a recommendation for approval, the request for approval of an intergovernmental agreement between the City of Champaign, the City of Urbana, and Champaign County regarding the Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistant Grant Program, which is something we've done for many years through the Sheriff's Office. Ms. Michaels and Mr. Goss, any discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. We will now move on in this fractured agenda to the nursing home fiscal year 2018 budget presentation. I absolutely appreciate your patience as we did the business of the county here. So we have representatives from SAK. We have County Administrator Snyder and Deputy County Administrator for Finance Ogden will take this from here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I get started with our budget presentation, I just wanted to introduce some of the folks that are here tonight. First of all, I'm not sure everyone has had a chance to meet Ms. Koenig, but this is Susie Koenig, who is the head of SAK Management Services, the new operator of the Champaign County Nursing Home. To her right is Mr. Tom Danker, who is the CFO for the organization. We also have in the first row here, we have Joyce Caillou, who is the Chief Operating Officer of SAK, and we also have Kim Colebrook, who is the new administrator of the nursing home. So as you recall, when we did the legislative budget hearings, we deferred review of the nursing home budget. We had some preliminary numbers, but I felt that it was not ripe yet for review, so as we used for some of our other things. But tonight I'd like to present two options that we're going to talk about. One is the regular budget presentation, and the other one is pursuant to direction from County Board on a resolution. So let me bring up the presentation. So we have two options here. The first option, we'll call it option A, represents a status quo budget. So what I mean by that is it represents a full 12 months of operations for the nursing home. We'll go into the details of that in a moment, but the one thing I wanted to note at this point is that this budget does not include reimbursement of the GO bond debt service as part of the budget. Previously, the nursing home had included that, so it's not in there. The second option is option B. It represents, per direction of the board, the development of a 6-month operational budget along with 6 months of wind-down expenditures. This is in contemplation of a potential transaction involving the home. So both of these budgets have a number of assumptions built into them. First of all, you know that the current census has been trailing around the 130. Today, I believe it's 132. The new budget includes improvement that we expect to obtain over the next several months. I'll let DB Susie address that, but there are a number of efforts that are ongoing to deal with the census challenges that we've had. So, Susie, I'll let you talk about that.
I'm sorry, Ms. Koenig, I'm going to interrupt you real quick. If anybody has questions as we go along, feel free to raise your hand and get recognized. I don't know if you're willing, I assume you're willing to take questions as we go. It's usually easier that way if there's something that's not clear. If you want to make sort of blanket comments, let's hold those until after the presentation. But for questions, feel free to interrupt. And if I don't see you, holler at me.
So, good evening. I would just like to say, and I know on behalf of SAK, we just want to thank Rick Snyder and his staff for really helping us through this transition. We really didn't have a transition. We walked in without a transition. And I will say the amount of time that we have all spent in working on this has just been unbelievable. And we've had the assistance of everyone from the county, including, you know, the treasurer, so everyone, legals. We just want to thank everyone because it's been a daunting task, but there's been a lot of good things that are going on. And from a census perspective, we are fairly confident that we're going to reach some good goals. And the reason being is this last week, we hired a new marketing director. We waited a few weeks to do that because we did not want to increase any position that we already had at the facility. So we waited until all of the other restructuring and allocations were done before we brought someone on so that it would not increase any cost. We hired somebody who has experience, and we have already, amongst ourselves, started marketing it. As many of you know, I've already personally gone to the hospitals and spoken to several of them, and we will be doing a large presentation on behalf of the University of Illinois School of Social Work. We may include some of the other School of Medicine, the legal. We have a lot of options. So, and we would like to include the Champaign County Nursing Home the name on behalf of giving that presentation. So we feel that we have been conservative in our projections, and I think our number that we feel that we will hit by January is 144. And that's not huge, but it gets us to the goal of where we want to be. And usually from a seasonal perspective, you know, as the winter months come on, gets cold, people start needing the services of the facility, and we expect it to start spiking and going up a little bit, but again, we kept everything very conservative. So by the end of December 2018, we are expecting 152. And with that being said, our payer mix changes, and it all depends on the payer mix. And as the payer mix fluctuates and goes up, we feel confident that we will get referrals. Again, though, you're going to look at the payer mix. If you look at the budget, we're very conservative. So we've really tried to be as conservative as possible on this. Without going into detail, you'll be able to see it once it goes on. I also would maybe, is this an appropriate time to talk about some other things, or should we just go?
Let me
Okay.
go to the next
Okay.
couple bullets, and we'll
Okay.
get back to that, to your
Okay.
impact statement. So that's always been a challenge for us. I'll talk a little bit more about census in a moment, just so you understand some of the sensitivity around that number. We've also been implementing staffing reductions commensurate with the loss of census. This current budget was approved for, I believe, about 215 full-time positions. The proposed budget for FY18 will have about 160, so over 50 positions eliminated through the restructuring. The next item is cost containment. We've been able to identify a number of areas. I think we've called them low-hanging fruit. I think that's true because we've been able to move quickly on these things, but we've addressed excessive costs in some of our services, including dietary. Also, we've identified a major savings in utilities. We determined that the previous contract that had been signed by the prior management company included a very high rate, I believe it was about almost 8.5 cents per kilowatt hour. We were able to, through the assistance of Mr. Brenner, our facilities director, to get that down to 4.8 cents. So almost half of what we've been spending. So that's going to generate over $100,000 in savings per year alone. I know that Susie also has some additional items that she'd like to reference in terms of dollar impacts on the home.
So, you know, I know everyone has been asking us for some numbers, and I'm prepared to give you a little bit better numbers today than I was the last time. We have, as I said before, I think we had some additional consultants that were at the facility prior to our coming on, and we have eliminated all of the additional consultants and hired full-time people to conduct those positions that are actually by law need to be there, such as the MDS consultant, the director of nursing. And both of those were not employees prior to our arrival. So we also, as we've discussed in the past, food service, with the exact same menus and same quality of food, we were able to drop the food cost to $5.25 per patient day. So we have also been able to look at other different staffing positions that we talked about, and there were mostly administrative staff. And within those staffing positions, with the positions that we restructured and eliminated, we've hired on also permanent people to address other areas of the facility that we needed, and these other either duplicative or redundant positions we eliminated, and we offered some of these people that had these positions, we offered them the new positions as well if they chose to keep it. So between all of that, the food, the positions, the electricity, or the utilities rather, and all of the other things that we feel that we've been able to reach at right now on an annualized basis from a dollar impact recommendation, we feel that at this point we have been able to at least save on an annualized basis the facility $800,000 to $1 million. Could have been higher, but what we did was we had a cost avoidance by eliminating the shift bonuses and filling empty positions, and we got rid of overtime. So we are moving to get rid of overtime. So had we kept those attendance bonuses and shift bonuses, the savings would have been much higher. So we didn't necessarily include that in this number.
I'm not quite clear. You said 800,000 to $1 million annualized saving.
Approximately.
Approximately, right. I put the approximate sign. But then you went on to say you're phasing out overtime and some other things, and then the saving would be greater?
Right. We did not include the extra bonuses that MPA had adopted for the staff prior to us coming.
But had you included that as part of the saving?
It would have been well over
It would have been well
$1 million.
over.
I think you might have accidentally said the savings were less, so that might have caused
Oh,
a
I'm
confusion.
sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for catching it.
So the next several items, in consideration of this, we're going to present a balanced budget for option A. That also includes assumptions that I've outlined here below. There is a reduced allocation for non-cap equipment. We have basically stripped that to the bone, so there's not a lot of money there for any furniture or other things that traditionally we've spent maybe in the $30,000 to $40,000 range, so that's been taken out. We also have not included any reimbursements on, any advancement on satisfying the accounts payable or allocations for depreciation or repayment of any loans. So those are not included in this budget. It also includes a non-collection of any of the older accounts receivable. As you've heard from us previously, there's a substantial amount of money in the AR. We're going to talk a little bit more in detail in a moment about what our strategy is to deal with that issue, but we feel it's more prudent not to expect that we're going to make any progress on collecting any outstanding revenues that haven't been billed, perhaps. We also anticipate that we will be issuing a tax anticipation warrant this year to cover the IMRF and FICA obligations that have accrued over the course of the year. Ms. Petrie, you have a question?
Another clarification question, and because I attended the meeting last night, and there was mention of billing or catching up with billing that had not been handled for many months, and some other billings which come, I think you mentioned roughly
It's
250,000.
approaching 300 because
Okay.
we didn't include some of the stuff that that's not finalized yet, but Medicare B, Medicaid.
Right.
And managed Medicaid B were approximately 250 to 260. Then that didn't include Medicare A, current Medicare A, and managed Medicare A, which creeps up to almost 300.
Well, I want to congratulate you on that accomplishment, but I did want to clarify that makes a new line in the sand, and so that's not an expectation that that will happen again, because you'll keep current with, he's smiling, I got it, right?
And
Okay.
we have taken over almost all of the billing into our offices. We have taken it out of the nursing home. Yep.
No more non-timely filing.
Yeah, as you recall, we talked about this a little bit, and we had found that the previous person who was in charge of this was still going back to October of 2016 on the billing, so 7 or 8 months in arrears. So that's been, for the most part, caught up. One other thing, which is not on here, but we did not talk much about the treasurer's cash flow projection, but I wanted to point out to that, and if you want to look at that, you can see that he has updated the numbers based on some of our current snapshot. Again, it's a snapshot in time. It's just kind of looking at things where we are and basing some future ideas on what we're currently seeing on revenue and expenses. And you'll see that the fund balance exceeds, at the end of 2017, $400,000 for the nursing home. But over the preceding months of that, you'll see that the revenues, while there's some fluctuation, they are relatively stable. So you don't see a major decline in those.
I think Ms. Michaels has a question for you on this. We were just talking about this.
Sorry, I was looking at this earlier. It looks like in October, November, and December that he's increased revenue by 200,000, which is pretty much around the corner here. So I wondered where that revenue was coming. Once again, unless you're just prorating what you expect to receive from past due income or what, but it kind of threw me a little bit there that it jumped that much.
The monthly revenue, which is the ongoing patient revenue, stays pretty much the same. It's 899, and my eyes are...
But it's 702 in September, sir.
Right. So I think that may not include all of the items. That's, I think, going forward. So that may not have everything, but it also includes 145,000 that we're projecting from IGT. We did receive it today. So our attorney had advised us that the state was planning to issue that check. So we've included that, and also an estimated 100,000 in December. I also want to note that the fund balance does include the 350,000 in cash that has been provided by the county board to the nursing home. So it's the 250 that was provided in the initial draw. We also drew 100,000 to make the September 1st payroll. So that's in the fund balance. So looking at it, of course, at least it seems to be that we're stabilizing those numbers, and there's potential, I think, for improvement on that going forward.
Yeah, we're not
I'm lost. I'm lost. Because if the intergovernmental transfer were to come each month, then you would have that on that line item instead of lumping it into the monthly revenue amount. The monthly revenue is the thing that changed from 702 to 899, starting in like 20 days from now, and then going forward, not taking into consideration the 100 there on the intergovernmental. What I'm trying to figure out is where's that extra $200,000 coming from for just monthly revenue starting next month?
Yeah, the revenue total, unfortunately, I don't have the line item detail for this, but I can tell you that over preceding months, the revenue's actually been projected around $918,000. So this may not reflect some payments that were received at the beginning of the month. It may be just what the treasurer had foreseen going forward from this point. So I don't know if he recorded that.
September's actual, but the rest
Okay.
is forward-looking, maybe.
Could be.
It's in the packet, the side packet on the first
Yeah.
page.
So you're saying is September is September is like
Actual.
partial actual and the
October's
last quarter
budget.
is forward-looking, or?
But-
Yeah, I
Budget.
hope, and that's why there's some confusion on that. So it's not the total, but I seem to remember that Mr. Welch used to do it with a forward look on this.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I guess that was part of my concern, is that if we're being conservative about that, and our census has been fairly consistent, I understand that we're wanting to increase it. I was looking probably for a more conservative monthly revenue amount, and that's just me.
But Rick said 9.
But I agree.
18 or something is the
Yeah.
average, so this sounds like
Yeah.
this is more conservative than that.
Okay. Thanks. Sorry. Thank you.
No, apologize for the confusion.
No,
on
thank
that.
you. It's good to get it clear.
Okay. So moving on, one of the challenges that the county board has faced, and which we encountered last year when we were working on the budget with MPA, is that there's a high level of sensitivity in the revenue numbers to your census projection. Just a change of a couple people in a particular payer class will make a huge shift in the total amount of revenue you're going to recognize. You realize that a Medicare patient we receive almost $500 a day for that person. So carrying an extra Medicare patient throughout the year makes about $180,000 change in revenue. So it can shift it a lot. So we tried to be very careful with this. You can see the past history, both in the Medicare here from 2011 going forward, and then the overall revenue projections, that a large part of, if you look at the right side here with the total revenue for the home, you see that a large part of any deficit here is actually looks like it's carried in within the Medicare numbers. And that's because Medicare is also a very desirable type of payer class, so all of the facilities in our area, as well as everywhere else in the state, tries to get as many Medicare people as you can. So that number is always hard to move. But we think that we'll have a better luck with this. We'll be doing things this year, and starting now, that have never really been done with the home in any of the past years. So we did, I think, a good job in 2017. We pushed the projection down considerably, below $1 million on the Medicare. Of course, with the fall-off in census, that's also been a challenge to attain, but it's not as big as a deficit on the Medicare side, at least, than it has been in the past. I'll talk a minute about the accounts receivable and the 2017 projection. Yes, Ms. Petrie.
Another question. As you indicated, Medicare is a very desirable category of residents any home wants. Have we ever done the calculation of how many Medicare beds are within the county and taking an average of how many available Medicare residents there potentially are out there, so we have some idea of what we can possibly anticipate on a good day, adding to our census at
So
the
that's
nursing home?
that's really hard to calculate because a lot of facilities are dually certified. So it means every bed can be certified for Medicare
I
or
see.
Medicaid.
Okay, got it.
So, yeah. Okay.
So as pointed out previously in an earlier board meeting, the accounts receivable that's over 12 months is about $2.2 million of the roughly $4.5 million in the accounts receivable total. We've discussed opportunities that we might have to address that. I want to have Susie talk to that a little bit about that. We know that we have both government revenue and also revenue from private pay and other sources. So I think we have a strategy worked out on this.
So I'm going to let Tom cover this part. Okay.
Sure. Thank you. So on the accounts receivable, there's, as we talked last time I was here, there's like $4.5 million in accounts receivable, $2.2 million over 12 months, and so $2.3 million 12 months and under. And on the governmental side, generally, if you don't bill your bill for the resident in the first 12 months, it's not any good. They won't pay. And so there's a number of receivables that are out there sitting there, and we don't know if they've been billed and just haven't been followed up on. Maybe they were billed, right out of the gate and nobody followed up on them. And so while it's highly, I guess, unlikely, there's still an opportunity to go out and collect those. And so we have, worked with this professional collection group that does collections of governmental type receivables. And what we'd like to do is offer them, some of these patients to go out and collect and test the fact that whether they're timely filed or whether they're not. And they'll come back to us right away and let us know kind of what the situation is.
And they're a local group. It's a local group that is very experienced, very involved, and is actually many of the individuals who used to work in these government agencies are now working in this group. So it's the best shot that we feel that we're going to get, and I think for everyone it will be a really good shot. So we're going to take the opportunity to work with them. We already know them. I work with them in other facilities, and we've been able to bring some really good monies in as a result of it.
And then the other group is the non-governmental, which is the private and insurance groups. And they also, not the private, but the insurance group also have a timely filing, and it depends on the insurance group. And we were looking at a contract, a couple hours ago, and the timely filing was 60 days. And some of those managed care companies are like that. And so, again, we can look at the accounts in the over 12-month category to see if they're timely filed. If they are, then it's just a matter of getting the proper documentation together and back to the insurance company to hopefully get the collection. On the private side, this is the majority of the over 1 year accounts, and those are private pay, and they're the secondary pay. So if you have Medicare and you have a secondary private, that's what's in there, and so those are kind of harder to collect. But we have a separate collection company that we use that is more focused on the private pay aspect, and so we'd like to bring them in and give them an opportunity to collect some of those revenues as well.
Ms. Petrie first, then Mr. McGuire.
I believe I asked this question the last time you were here, and you felt you just hadn't had enough time to add the numbers, so I'll try again. And that is just the back of an envelope calculation on how much you think is out there in both of those categories, and in past experience, since you've used these agencies in your other homes, what percentage would you anticipate recovering, and what percentage then goes to the agency that helps with the collection?
Yeah, the contingency percentage is negotiated. It's between 18-20%, something like that, and the amount, the 0 to 1 year, 2.3 million. I would say you're kind of in the 80% category in that group. Yeah. And you should be, because they all can be timely filed, and they all can be researched and so forth. The private is kind of dragging that number down, but the rest of it should be good. And the 2.2 is you're probably in the 10 to 15%, something like that.
But again, we have to investigate, we have to take a look, and we don't.
I understand perfectly.
Okay.
I just wanted to have a little bit in my head as potential out
'Cause
there
we have to have all the
without
documents.
overshooting.
Right, we have to have the documents, they have to be available to us, so.
Yeah, the next time you come in here, there will be a historical marker erected on that wall over there. For the first time since I've been on the board, that this county board has gotten a straight answer to the question of what percentage of the AR is probably collectible. So thank you very much.
No, I'm not happy. I am laughing at Mr. Alex.
Mr. McGuire, did you have a question?
Yes, well, I appreciate all those comments about the old AR. I do want to drill into it a little bit further, and I hope that we're very successful in trying to get those monies. obviously there's some more discussion here. The process, as I understand it, is someone's possibly private, and then they go into Medicaid, and there's an application process that goes to the state. And our experience has been for the last 2 years, we haven't had a state budget, so those Medicaid applications either have been filled out incorrectly or the state sat on them for a year. So is it possible that there's a dual number there? They've been held as private until that Medicaid application has been completed. How many of those people are still in the nursing home and we can expect payment from the state because they don't actually, aren't actually there now? And how many applications are now being completed by whether it's Decatur or Chicago or whatever hub is supposed to be filing these things?
Jim, if I can jump in, I think we're drawing, I would assume these AR numbers don't include any of the unapproved or the pending Medicaid applications. These are all billed?
This is the difference, okay? We have a group, as we just discussed, and the group has several, the first governmental group that we discussed, many of these people are from the Decatur office. They are, they've left Medicaid, and this is what they do. They know how to get in there, and they know how to work through the system. We use them in other offices, in other facilities, and they are successful at getting through the Medicaid pending applications. It is work. The problem is for us is that we have to make sure that the contracts are in the facility, that we have all the correct information, that they were filled out, that we're able to be able, it's a lot of research on our part and their part. It doesn't happen overnight, but I will say, once we're able to dig into the records and get these records out, we are able to get pending applications that other people have tried that can't.
And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to interrupt you, Jim. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page here. The number, this 2.2 million over 12 months, that's all actually billed, right? So I mean, sorry, we assume it's
don't
billed.
know.
You're not counting Medicaid, not yet approved Medicaid applications in that 2.2 million, right? That's a different pool of potential revenue?
There's, the Medicaid pendings have been classified as private, awaiting approval by the state. And so there's a number, I don't know the number, Mr. McGuire, as far as that number is in the private category. That's why we're kind of downgrading private.
Okay, so
when it
Mr.
comes to
McGuire was
receivables.
exactly right. That's what I wasn't understanding, was whether
Right.
that your private there included the Medicaid pending or not, and you say it does.
I don't know exactly.
So when you say receivable, I'm not sure whether that means billed or waiting for permission to bill, and it sounds like it's both at this point.
Hopefully it's billed.
So, and the beauty is that we have 12 months, so if we can still get the information, it's in the timely filing period.
Okay, I'm
So
sorry,
that's
Mr.
why
McGuire, I
there's
didn't want to interrupt you. Please continue if you had more. I just want to make sure I was understanding
No,
what you were
it's
asking.
not a problem, because I hope it helps define it better for everyone, because it is confusing. And and you say you have 12 months, some of this AR is over longer than the 12 months, so if that application is older than that,
Right.
it won't be or probably won't be successful. So
We don't
we'll have
know
to
that for
define it.
sure,
I
but-
would say keep trying.
We're not
I'm
giving
not going to
up.
slow you down. I'm trying, but
We're
it
not
gives
gonna
us a
give
better
up.
idea, and hopefully, as you said, you'll be successful. So that's what I wanted to find out. Thank you.
I think that the firm that Susie's mentioned, the people there are good friends with a very well-known attorney that has been seen around the General Assembly for many years. So I think that they have probably the best shot at getting collections made of anyone that we might consult on this. So as mentioned here, more detailed analysis is required for the documentation on the billing, so we know what's good and what isn't. Right now, as things stand, we're projecting a deficit of about $400,000 for the nursing home. So not as bad perhaps as we might expect. So before I get into the two budgets, I want to point out that in your packets you have in the additional handouts, you've got a two-sided sheet that has both the A and the B represented, so you could do a side-by-side comparison of these as we move forward, and if you have any questions, we can answer those. Again, option A here represents the budget for a full 12 months of operations. Revenue and expenditures are approximately in balance, slightly higher in the revenue, just a few $1,000s, with 160 full-time employees. Mr. McGuire.
Yes, I'd like to ask a question about that. Looking at the revenue chart that you show, what page is it? They're not numbered. The revenue projections for 2011 through 17, the actuals that are listed, and the surplus or deficit. Obviously, there's deficit. What is the 16 shows an actual of $12,700,000, and then the actual for 17, which is probably it does say projected 10 million, but yet you have a revenue projection of 12.3. Which is obviously significantly higher than the 17. I hope we get another $2 million in revenue from the nursing home in that year. I don't know that we'll match 2016, which had a significantly higher census. Is that?
We won't meet that level.
So I don't understand the number of 12.3, I guess, in the short.
It goes from 11.8 to 12.3. 12.3 has the additional census that Susie talked about, the 141 to 152. 144 to 152. And so that's greater than the census that drove the projected 11,000,008.
So
about $500 million different.
your suggested increase in census is almost 75% private, or
No.
do you?
No, it's Medicare and Medicaid.
It really goes
Right.
through all payer classes.
Ms. Michaels?
Excuse me, I'm a little lost. Oh, crud. Usually I can go a half a mile without a problem. I'm a little lost. You said there's a comparison sheet in our packet, and I'm kind of looking for that so I can see where I'm at.
It looks like this. It's right in the front of the handouts.
Okay,
And you'll see, it looks a lot like the typical AS400 printouts that we have for the
Okay.
budget.
thank you.
And you'll see on the right side, there's a budget A and then a budget B. So when we're talking about these, that's the numbers we're looking at. Okay, so this obviously, again, just to reiterate, sensitive to Medicare census changes. It does reflect the reductions that we're planning, does not include any catch-up on the accounts payable, and it doesn't include the debt service. That debt service, we currently have budgeted in the general fund to be reimbursed. So it is included in our final numbers right now that will be presented. Commentary on Budget A. Obviously, we have some cash flow concerns, even though this is a break-even budget. We know that there's at least 3 payroll months in the year. So there's potential, depending on how revenue plays out, that there could be additional loans required. It's speculative at this point. Also, of course, if there's deterioration in the census, if we don't achieve the numbers that we're projecting, that would obviously create a deficit unless we cut expenditures further. There are potential facility capital investments that are not funded in the budget. We know that in past years we've had unexpected demands. In 2016, we had the lint filtration system, the fire damper project, also the boilers. We've recently replaced the security system for the doors in the home. So those kinds of things, when they arise, because they're almost always related to life safety issues, could be potential for an unexpected requirement for funding for that. So that is always a risk. Another thing is that we have not included repayment of obligations, and we've detailed those there. It roughly adds up to about $4 million. So that includes the GEO bond debt service that the nursing home was unable to repay for 2016 and 2017. That's a little over $544,000. We have the two cash draws and the boiler loan, which represents all of the general fund loans. That's $576,802. And then we included the accounts payable over 60 days. I think to get back to a reasonable operating basis, we want at least to get current within 60 days if possible. So that amount there is $2.9 million. That includes about $500,000 owed directly to the county in our accounts payable, and it includes things like IT services, payments for external auditors, and other related expenses. The rest of it is to private vendors, the $2.4 million there. The other thing here is that we would have to address in adopting this budget how we would proceed with the restoration of the fund balance. I believe that our current projection right now is that we'll be at about 11.5% of expenditures of our annual expenditures in the fund balance, which is below the 12.5% as required by policy. Tammy, I don't know if there's anything that you want to add on the fund balance to this.
I think the point that Rick's trying to make is that with this nursing home status quo budget, it does not address outstanding balances that are owed to the county that would help us to restore our fund balance and may further impact our fund balance if there are capital improvements that can't be funded through this budget.
Question, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ms. Petrie.
Again, a clarification from what I heard last night. On the other vendors, that $2.4 million, last night it was mentioned that there are 7 vendors that are owed $100,000 or more. So if I just take $100,000, we're at $700,000 on those. Is that part of this $2.4 million?
That's correct.
Good, thank you.
I had a question about the AP. I'm sorry, was somebody else down there raising their hand?
Mr. McGuire?
Sorry, Jim, I can't see. I can't always see you back there. Go ahead. Go ahead, then I'll ask mine.
When she talked about capital improvements that we wouldn't have, when Ms. Ogden talked about capital improvements that we wouldn't have the reserve for, were they for both the nursing home and the general buildings of the county? I mean, the reserve would be that depleted. Obviously, through the list, I see that the nursing home wouldn't be able to pay for those capital improvements they've had in the past, or some of the vendors, but include all those capital improvements.
I had a question. The $502,000 in county AP, how does that interact with the tax anticipation award? Is that still owed to the county after the 2019 or 2018 tax anticipation warrants? They'll be issued at the end of this year?
That does not include the IMRF or FICA, I believe.
What is it?
It's the accrued amount for the things like I mentioned, like there are internal services that are provided to the home. The highway department provides vehicle maintenance services.
Okay, so what you're saying, by including that in Budget A, you're saying that that by the end of 2018, you would expect the nursing home to have accrued a debt of $502,000 or accrued payables to the county in that amount that are not accounted for in the budget?
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. McGuire?
Well, is the list longer because of the bonds, the GEO bonds wouldn't be paid, the general fund loans wouldn't be paid, the AP wouldn't be paid, plus all the vendors?
That's correct. And so the total for that would be $4,052,926 projected.
Mr. Mr. Snyder, so.
Oh, Mr. King.
So going back to your aged accounts payable over 60, so I understood the 502 to be a part of that, over 60. Is that not part of, he sounds like Chris was asking if that will be for the future.
That's part of the 2.9 million total, so.
But is it passed?
It includes what we currently have. I mean, the 2.9 is actually a current number that we have. We ran a report to get that number. I'm anticipating we won't have any catch-up on any of those older invoices. I mean, what happens today is that as we have revenue come in, we pay older invoices, but then there's new invoices created. So we're not making any progress on the aging, if that makes sense. So we're just as far out.
Sorry, now you lost me again. This $4,052,926.
Right.
That's what we expect to be obligated at the end of 2017, or what we expect to be obligated at the end of 2018?
2018.
So
We're anticipating, because we're going with a break-even budget, so we don't anticipate any progress on what the outstanding accounts payable is.
I think you just contradicted or answered. I think you answered a question I didn't ask. Is during fiscal year 2018, we will accrue an additional $4 million in obligations, or we will start fiscal 2018 with $4 million in obligations and end fiscal year 2018 with $4 million of obligations in this budget, because this budget doesn't pay any of them down?
Number two.
Number two, okay, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Goss.
So basically, what you're telling us is you put together a budget here that you call break even, and we don't have any repayment on anything.
It's basically to tread water.
Yeah, well, so it's really not a budget, because we've not paid back a single debt from the end of the year to the end of the year. So, I mean, that's a great way to budget. I mean, we just go rack up a bunch of debt, and then we don't pay it off. I don't think it's, I mean, I think it's kind of a hoax.
Well, Mr. Goss, you're new to the board, so this is kind of how this works, and we will have decision points as we go through the budget process that would have to bring this into balance if we were going to pass it. I mean, we could not pass this as a budget. If that's what you're saying, I agree with you.
Yeah, obviously, there's important issues related to the fund balance. We're below what we're required to do. So part of the decisions are going to require us to look at that $4 million and figure out how do we make progress on that. So option B includes the 6 months of operations, as we mentioned. Those are the same numbers that were used in the operational budget that was in an A. It also includes anticipated wind-down expenses, including about 2 months' worth of accounts payable that, if we were to assume that we would close on some sort of transaction by June 30th, we would probably have utilities and other service bills that would come in over the next couple months. In speaking with the broker, we have a minimum, or suggested minimum price for the home based on an analysis that he's done. However, I will point out that the number is speculative. We don't have any hard numbers to go on it, but basically it's professional judgment that a transaction would yield about $11 million for the home. So we've included that in the budget as well. You'll see that.
That's why that's higher.
Pardon?
That's why that number is higher than we're on the 12-month. Got it now.
Correct. So the revenue in this scenario would be about $18,721,853, with expenditures of $15,053,032. So what this budget basically does is it says that if we were to proceed with a transaction on the home, that the proceeds would be used to satisfy the outstanding accounts payable. We would pay off the loans from the county, so the cash loans and also the boiler loan. And then the GO bond would be paid off when it was eligible to be paid off. There would also be expected transaction costs. There'd be expected transaction costs related to the broker fees, legal fees, costs for employee separation, anything else that might be required to be paid. We also anticipate we need to cover the unreimbursed IMRF and FICA expenses in 2018. So that will depend, of course, about how long it takes to actually execute a transaction.
Okay, I have a question.
Ms. Petrie.
11 million, potentially. Is that going to clear the slates? Not make money, but clear all the slates of money owed to vendors, paying back the county? Are we clean?
What I would anticipate would happen in this scenario, we would be able to take care of all the things that are shown on this chart. The one item that we would not pay off would be the construction bonds on the home. However, we have a dedicated levy to that, to the repayment of those. One of the bonds, the issue is expected to be retired, I think, either the next year or 2 years, and then the second bond will pick up on the principal payments. Right now, it's interest only, and then it will be retired by 2021. So we're looking at potentially about 4 more years of payments, and then the levy would drop off, the bonds would be paid off.
Okay, so I've got sort of a top-level question here. The difference between, let's talk about the difference between Budget A and Budget B. If we were able to pay, I mean, let's assume for the moment that the goal is to keep the nursing home as a county operation. You'd basically need to generate, it looks like, an extra probably $2 million a year over what Budget A does. That would basically pay off all of the accumulated debt over 2 years. I mean, split it in half. I don't know, obviously, how much, I don't know what the aging is, but if you gave yourself 2 years to pay down that debt, then you'd basically need to, it looks like you need to generate, you were what, 4-point-something million short?
It's 4 million.
4 million short, so basically 2. So the route to sustainability, basically, at least in the next 2 years, is generate an extra $2 million a year.
Yeah. I mean,
What would the census have to be, average census have to be to do that? Based on the current payer mix. I mean, obviously, if we get all Medicaid, if we get all Medicare, then we can all probably retire tomorrow, but we're not going to get that, right? So what would the census have to be? And if you can't answer that off the top of your head, then talk to Rick and get that number to me sooner or later, because I think that's going to come down, I mean, that's a key question, right? I mean, the census was regularly 180 for years, and now it's 130. That's a big difference.
The 2 years may be a little bit quick. It may take longer and less of a growth rate.
I guess I'm asking, like, how many patients would have to materialize on January 1 of 2018 to turn Budget A into a sustainable budget? You have to generate that extra $2 million a year.
There's other areas of revenue, too, that we really have not looked at. So the facility has done nothing on the CMI rate, which is when you go in and work with Medicaid residents, you can increase your rate if you work with the programming. And this facility really had one of the lowest rates I've ever seen. I think I talked about that in the past. We've already started working on that.
So I think we can get back to you with that number. And
It's just useful. I mean, obviously, if the numbers.
Because it's obviously a calculation, and it'll be
Sure.
a
I
blend
assume we have an
of
approximate
the
number
payer
of
group. Yeah.
$1 million per patients per $1 million of revenue or something. So it's just useful for people to keep in mind sort of how realistic it is to contemplate that, and what would have to happen if we were to say adopt Budget B as the draft budget, what it would take to get the county board to say, oh, wait, no, this thing's making money. Change horses, and that'd be a great number to have.
Before I call on anyone else, just a quick comment. If you remember the scenarios we discussed about different ways to make the home sustainable, we've talked about the tax revenue if the levy had been adopted or passed. Yeah, we were talking about an additional $2.5 million a year approximately, and it was expected to take about 3 years to recover from it. So
if you think of it another way, you're going to have to find, savings on that in order to make a go of it. The break-even number is much improved now, thanks to all of the work that's been done. But I think that to be able to pay off $4 million, it is going to be a challenge. So I think Mr. McGuire's first, then Ms. Petrie, then Ms. Furtado.
Okay, and the discussion is interesting and I think helpful. But trying to squeeze $2 million or $2.5 million a year out of the budget, looking at the discussion about the reserve for the county itself, I don't think that there is that space, because we would have to backfill those payables for that.
Yeah, the reason I asked about census was I think if anything's going to happen there, it has to happen on the revenue side. Would you agree with that? I mean,
well, I would.
I don't see a way to cut $2 million. I don't see any place to cut $2
I
million.
would agree with that, but the discussion has been that we would increase census by 4 by the end of 17, maybe, and maybe 50 by the, so to get to that glide path, to get to the point where they'll both meet, is going to be 2 or 3 years in the future.
Well, that would be the answer to my question. I wasn't opining on whether or not it was going to happen or not. I just wanted to know what the number was.
Ms. Petrie?
Well, just a reminder, many moons ago, we asked MPA to run 3 scenarios, and you could probably build a bit on what they did, and the bottom line was it was run on, I think, about 180 or 180 census, and it could only be 40% Medicaid. The rest had to be Medicare and private, and that was just to make the home sustainable. And that's our goal. I mean, we're a county, so that would be sustainable. Those figures may shift a bit based on what you all have been working on, but that was it. And the constant was the number of residents. The changeable was the percentage of Medicaid to see where it would be sustainable. And I agree with Chris's request, except I want to see what it does for 10 years, because.
We'll run it however you guys want to run it.
Okay.
Ms. Furtado and then Ms. Michaels.
My question sort of echoes Jim's question from the earlier budget, and I voted against the whole 6-month plan the last time it was up, just because I don't like to do budgets that aren't real. And so, what if it takes 8 months? Then we just have to come back and do another 2-month budget? Is that what would happen? I'm new, so if say it took 8 months or 9 months or 5 months or, more months, I guess, we'd have to just come back and just reappropriate more money?
I think that our anticipation is there's probably going to need to be some budget amendments of some sort going forward. There's a lot of unknowns here, so we're giving our best educated guess on some of these things. But, things have changed. I mean, we don't control what the state does. That's out of our hands. So that's one thing. We don't know who's going to come to the home. I mean, we may exceed our census projections. We may not meet our census projections. So it has a big swing effect. So I think it's just important for the county board to understand the potential for disparities from what we're presenting tonight.
But and one last follow-up question. So if we did budget out for a year and then for some reason we didn't need the full budget, we could then reappropriate that money at that time, correct? Into other places?
We can do a budget amendment at any time.
Yeah.
It's the nursing home's a bit of a challenge because since it's an enterprise fund,
Yeah.
there are questions, we can't,
Just move it. All right.
spend it on
Thanks.
something
That's helpful.
completely random, but.
The 6-month thing was my main, why 6 months?
Yeah, I think the goal here, I think the county administrator's goal here was just to come up with, sort of skeletal budget scenarios to point us in directions that we could take. But ultimately, we're going to have to, at the special finance committee meeting, we're going to have to take these up and sort of give guidance as to, are we going to, target the budget B plan, which would presume a sale or budget for a sale and see what happens during the first, 3 months of the year, or do we do the budget A
if we do the budget A, then we have to decide what our target is in terms of how much of that $2.4 million we're realistically, or that $4 million we're realistically going to be forced to pay down within the next year, and find that money somewhere. So this is sort of two stakes in the ground, but what we'll end up with probably won't be exactly either one of these.
That's helpful, thanks.
Ms. Michaels?
Yeah, I'm sure you'll do your calculations considering a net for the number of residents that we would need to add. Just want to make sure that, yes, we can add revenue, but there's also going to be some expenses too. So just for general purpose, I'd like to make sure that we see the offset to that.
I don't know if there are any other questions.
Excuse me, I think my question was about, thank you for presenting the budgets, but were there any, I guess, community organizations or hospitals that you consulted or you talked about maybe some type of endorsement for your budget proposal?
We have not presented the budget to anyone until, obviously, this is the first place that it's been brought. But, again, we've gotten really, really, really positive response. We plan on going and making some really deep discussions with the hospitals that were never done here before. And we, future census opportunity, there's an upside. If we beat this budget, it's truly an upside. We tried to be conservative because we want to beat the budget.
In the past, you've seen census, projections that were very, very high, and we really wanted to stay away from that. So, I mean, you can make whatever revenue you want. We could say we're going to have 200 people next year, but that's not realistic, I don't think.
Okay, and here's a $2 million question, and since it's the first time I've been able to talk to you, I guess it's the first time I get to ask this. Why is the census 130 instead of 180?
Okay, so I'm going to be really honest.
I think everybody here probably has a slightly different theory as to why that's the case. I mean, it's been opined that concern over a sale has led to a drop off. There's concern over a closure has led to a drop off. I mean, one thing, negative publicity, whatever it is, but that's a pretty substantial drop off. And what would it take with either scenario that we do here, right? Whether the county board telegraphs the willingness to sell or telegraphs the willingness to invest additional money keeping it open, what does it take to basically get back to that level of census that we used to have in this kind of a market? And I guess that would be a valid question, which anyone who is interested in buying a home or operating a home would ask too, is can this home get back to a census of 180?
So we've spoken to a lot of families. There's a lot of families who just recently, last week, were pulling their mother out, and she's probably almost 100 years old, and they were putting her at another facility. And to change someone at that age, that's transfer trauma. I was thinking of the patient. Turned out, I called the family myself because I wanted to know. And, she swore up and down that the care was absolutely wonderful. And, there's nothing that she could say wrong, but her brother keeps reading all these things in the newspaper and sees things publicly spoken about a sale, and she's concerned. And I said, but wouldn't you be concerned about sending your mother somewhere and changing her environment after all this time? Because, I'm really interested in talking to these people. And she said, you know what? I am concerned. And my brother, is the one that's making the decisions. So that was one family, because I personally reached out to them. And there have been a few others as well. And I think that, again, if you look at the census when it dropped, I think that's when a lot of all of the talk and things started. If you really look back at the history of the census, And just knowing that we got to full compliance as quickly as we were with the authorities, with the government, moving forward with all of the potential possibilities, I think there is an opportunity for growth and, that this facility has never seen before.
And a follow-up question to that, and again, this is not particularly predisposing what we plan to do with the home, or presuming what we plan to do with the home, to what extent is it worth focusing on people who have left in our marketing versus new patients?
I'm sorry, what was
I
it?
mean, we have people who have left within, if this theory that talk
Residents?
of a sale or negative publicity or whatever is the reason that people have left the home, and you can point to ways in which that's been fixed, is your first reach out to people who have left the home to try to get them to come back, or is it people who?
It's
the new
really
patients?
both, but as soon as we find out, because I get a census sheet every single day, and Rick now also gets a census sheet every day, and we see the ins and the outs, and I ask about every single resident, why they're leaving, where they're going, and what the issues are. And everybody knows now that I'm going to ask that, because I see that every day. So they better have an answer. Everybody should have an answer for me. And, I ask then what the reason is, and I'll go ahead and I'll talk to the family, which I did. I will call the families myself to see what it is. And if it's something negative, I'll ask about that too. But we really have not had anyone that I think that I've spoken to, and I'm just trying to remember about something negative about the care. I mean, everyone talks about the caregivers and really about, positive things. Now, look, the home is not perfect, and you see that, you know that. When you deal with people, it's not widgets. And people, do things and we try to teach and we try to train, and it's not always going to be 100%. But you know what? What's important is getting the details, talking in meetings about situations that occur and not even knowing what all the details are. I don't understand why something like that is even discussed. Because when you talk about residents in particular, it's an invasion of their privacy and it's against resident rights. So we should not even be discussing individual residents in any public forum of anything that occurs. And it's a breach. You all know what a breach is. That should never be done. And I hope that everyone listens to this and does not do this anymore about individual situations. Those situations should be taken care of, discussed with administration, discussed with nursing. If we have to get involved, I'll get involved myself. But again, this home has got to be run professionally, competently, and people have to be held accountable.
Thank you for those comments, and certainly the challenge of operating a facility that's very much in the public eye and subject to Open Meetings Act and FOIA and so forth is, I'm sure, a challenge compared to running private homes. And I've told people repeatedly that many of the things that you read about in the paper that happen at the Champaign County Nursing Home happen every day at private homes, too. You just don't read about them in the paper. So I appreciate your comments.
Absolutely.
And
Thank
I
you.
would appreciate you sort of cautioning board members to try to respect our residents' privacy.
Thank you.
Just one last comment here, just going back to Budget A. We're talking about the obligations. The portions that are related to loans to the nursing home, this is not like a credit card type of financing situation. So at some point, we have to either pay those or we have to forgive them or do something with them. But at some point, you're going to have to figure out how to fund those, and if it's forgiveness, then those again will have to come through some source. The only source that I see right now would be to cut other general fund departments to make up the difference. And I think potentially if we look at the 3-year recovery period we talked about with the tax, I think that you're looking at about $1.3 to $1.4 million in cuts per year to be able to satisfy those and get it back to within 60 days. So are there any other questions I can answer tonight?
Thank you.
Well, thank you, and definitely thank you for being here. It's a pleasure to
Thank
meet
you.
all of you.
Thank you.
Okay, so Rick, don't go anywhere. I assume we're going to go into the general corporate fund, we'll do the 2017 reports. And you want to do those from back there, or do you want to do those from your
Does he need a
usual
break?
seat?
All right.
Floor is yours.
Actually, you know what? I think I'm going to defer to Ms. Ogden. She hasn't said much tonight, so.
Let her earn her money.
This will be short and sweet because there's not much change. The good news on the revenue side is that in August, we received 3 disbursements from AOIC for state reimbursement. So that was a positive for us. We also saw some slight improvement in revenue for non-business licenses, fees, and fines. And not much change on the expenditure side. So that translated into a little bit of improvement in our projected revenue to expenditure difference. It stands at projection of negative $373,914, and a little bit of improvement in the percentage of the expenditure budget for our fund balance, which I believe last month was 11.5%, and with this improvement is now 11.7%.
Any questions for Ms. Ogden? None yet?
On the change report, there are no changes.
That was easy, and I suspect there'll be no comments on that. So we want to move on to, actually, I guess we got to do health insurance before decision points. So our next item would be the Labor Management Health Insurance Committee's health insurance recommendation.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I get started here, I wanted to introduce a few folks in the room. We have our representative from Gallagher, our broker, Mr. John Malachowski, and seated next to him is our representative from Blue Cross Blue Shield. I'm sorry, I forgot your name. Deb Simmons? Okay. And then we also have our health insurance specialist, Debbie Heiser, so that we can answer any questions that the board has. So let me just talk briefly about this. As you know, last year we had a very challenging situation. When we received our initial quotation, we received a proposed increase of about $2.5 million over the current policy. It was basically a 51% increase. And that's obviously not sustainable for the county or probably anyone else in Illinois. So we worked very hard and were able to, through competition, drive the cost of the policy down to an increase of 11.6%. When you consider where the market is going outside of these group plans, the Illinois marketplace has been growing in cost at a rate, I believe, about 40% in the past 2 years. So 40% last year, 40% again this year is what I saw in the paper. So to be able to have that result, and then with our result this year, and our recommended selection of Blue Cross for the county insurance policy, it's only a 2.7% increase over our current rate. So we had been projecting a much larger increase when we did our budget development. So we're very gratified to be able to reduce a major chunk of the deficit that we had talked about earlier. Some of the highlights on this. The plan is a PPO plan. You know that our current plan is an HMO plan. The county previously enjoyed a PPO plan, but in order to economize, at one point we switched from PPO to HMO with Health Alliance. So the PPO provides a much broader network of providers to people. Previously, if you're under the HMO plan, you're very much restricted to those providers that work within Health Alliance. Those are mostly within this area. So outside of the area, or if you wanted to go specialists, referrals were required in many cases. there was just this plan will open up those options for employees considerably. So if you want to take advantage of, say, a Mayo Clinic or a University of Chicago or some other hospital, you don't require the carrier's approval to do that. Those are all in network, as well as many other facilities. I see this also as a benefit for people who have dependents who are living outside the area. If, say, someone in our plan has a child attending college in another state, they will be able to go to providers in that area. They won't have to come back here to receive in-network benefits. So another major plus. There were some comments. I just want to address those that were made during public participation. One of the questions regarded the bidding process. One of the, I think, I wasn't here when this all happened, but at some point in the past, there was an election to go with the Labor Management Health Insurance Committee to give employees more of a voice in the process. And one of the things that the committee did was they brought on the services of a professional broker. The decisions regarding a health insurance plan are incredibly complex and detailed. I can't tell you, I mean, this year was actually probably a little bit simpler than last year, but we looked through all sorts of data. Much of that data is confidential, so it's not stuff that can be shared publicly with other employees. And the fact is that it takes a great amount of diligence on the committee's part to absorb all that information and to be able to make assessments on that. And I know that the board members, the committee members that are also county board members here tonight can probably attest to some of those challenges in understanding all the information. So that's why we use a broker instead of an RFP process. We've also found that in the process of soliciting these proposals that more than one round has been necessary to actually drive the cost down. So the first numbers you get aren't the ones that you end up at the end with. So we did get some other quotes. In particular, we did allow Health Alliance to submit additional quotations. We had looked at our experience numbers. Experience is your claims going back for the last several years. Everyone uses different numbers for those, but in general, it's just the last year or last 2 years or however they weight those and figure out what they think your health insurance cost is going to be so that they can deliver a quotation for your premiums. So we allowed them to, because our experience actually was improving this year, we had gone through 2 years of really difficult claims, very high claims, and which I'll also mention is those claims and the losses sustained on those exceeded the amount of money we paid on our premiums. So nobody was making money on the policy in those 2 years. So we were able to benefit from the improvement in our experience and generate some very favorable quotes for the county. There were the two finalists were, of course, Health Alliance and on Blue Cross. There's a difference of about $145,000 in cost to the county between the two proposals. It's slightly different. These proposals both include the cost for ACA taxes. The Congress has not determined yet whether those there'll be a relief on that in the future year. So we have also bundled into the proposals numbers that include, if the taxes are not charged, a reduction in the actual premium. So you see that it's pretty low for Blue Cross. I believe it's 0.4% increase over our current rates if there's no ACA assessments done.
Rick, the ACA tax would apply to either plan, right?
That's correct. Okay. Yeah. So the deductibles, the out-of-pocket limits are the same. If you look at the information regarding the benefits, the co-pays remain pretty much identical. Of course, the Health Alliance plan currently only provides in-network benefits. Blue Cross provides both in-network and out-of-network. The out-of-network benefits have a higher deductible and higher out-of-pocket, but there is at least coverage for those people. But my experience has been that Blue Cross has pretty good coverage in terms of networks. I don't know too many people that aren't. Which brings me to my last point here, which is also in the memo, and that there are some people at Carl, namely the primary care doctors in the Champaign-Urbana area who are not part of the Blue Cross network. It doesn't apply to doctors in Rantoul, Monticello, Mattoon, any of the other areas outside of the immediate area around Carl Hospital. And it's just for the primary care physicians. So based on the assessment that the committee did, we found that approximately 50% of the members in the plan have primary care designations that are not in network. So those persons will need to select a different primary care physician in order to retain in-network benefits. They don't have to, but I think obviously people are going to want to stay in network with that. So that will be a change. It's not unlike a change that most, I think, other entities have dealt with. City of Urbana recently switched from Health Alliance to Blue Cross. I believe they're on the same plan with the same deductible. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand that switch has gone very well. We did look at some of the claims data, and it looks like over 95% of those claims are in network. So it seems like that transition has gone pretty successfully for the employees there. So I expect something similar to happen in this case. With that, I guess I'll stand for any questions you may have. Ms. Petrie.
I have three based on some of the comments shared during our caucus, and if you might address those. There was concern that staff was not informed about the health insurance possible choices before the Labor Committee took a vote. And then the second is the $140,000 cost differential to the county, and if it was ever offered to the staff members to pay more for their insurance so they could stay within the Health Alliance for that 50% who had doctors within Health Alliance, was expressed concern about having to change the primary care doctor. So if you could address both of those.
So for question number 2, I think the question sort of revolves around whether people could opt into different plans and then pay a different rate. And we found that that's not going to be an effective way to pool employees. To try to offer 2 plans, I think just would not, we would lose the benefits of each because it would create a smaller pool for those. I don't think that it's unreasonable to have people make changes to their primary care. We figured that the average number of visits per person in the plan was about 1 per year, so 1 visit to their primary care per year would be affected. All of the Carl specialists are still in network with Blue Cross, and they're fully covered. Once you fulfill your deductible each year, coverage of all costs, including the facilities charges, are covered at 100%. So I think it's as good a plan as we've had in the past with, of course, there's some changes. And I think there are some new benefits, too, that have to be included with this. We also have some wellness benefits that have been proposed with this. And also, if either of you would like to come up and add anything that I've not covered that you think I should have, please feel free to come on up.
I like to think that they saved the best for last, right? The decision to make a health insurance change is always a difficult one. No one is ever going to be 100% satisfied in this kind of a decision. The decision really comes down to essentially whether or not individuals within the health insurance plan are going to be given an opportunity to have access to a network of physicians across the country, frankly, specialists that handle cases that are significantly much more advanced than what we have here in Champaign, Urbana, versus having some individuals certainly be looking at making a choice for a different primary care physician. All of the physicians at Christie Clinic, all the primary care physicians at Christie Clinic are in that Blue Cross Blue Shield PPO network. All of the OBGYNs at Carl are in the Blue Cross Blue Shield network. So it's not an OBGYN choice. It's basically a family practitioner, pediatrician, and internist issue. Christie Clinic has partnered, frankly, with Blue Cross Blue Shield to assure that they do have the capacity to handle the individuals who would have to move their primary care physician. Now, if a person chooses to keep their primary care physician at Carle Clinic, they can certainly do so under this plan. Essentially, the expenses of those office visits would essentially be completely out of their pocket if they did that. But that would be, again, a personal decision.
May I have a follow-up question? To pooling, we've touched on that on the fringes several times in past years. You've indicated that Urbana is basically has the same plan that's being offered to the county employees. Are we at a point where a conversation with Urbana would leverage better health insurance premiums and such?
I don't honestly know. We're not the broker for Urbana, but I don't know exactly what the plan is that Urbana has. They simply have a Blue Cross Blue Shield plan. So we're talking about potentially some differences there. Frankly, adding 300 people to a group of is not enough to make a significant difference in rates at this point.
I wanted to answer, before I go to Mr. Alex, I just want to answer your other question, Ms. Petrie, which was about communications, and I apologize. The information regarding Blue Cross has actually begun to be disseminated to the committee in July, and I know that we received proposals at least by early August. I think it was the first week of August. So there was almost a month before the time that, or from the time that we had the information about the policies proposals to when the committee vote actually occurred. And the committee actually, which voted for this 13-2, so it was almost unanimous, understood that some of these issues, there's some of the concerns that have been raised about primary care physicians, so I think they had a good handle on it. We certainly welcome the input of all employees regarding health care insurance. Obviously, it's an important element of the benefit package. But again, there's been a recognition that because of the complexity of the issues involved, that a committee is probably the best forum to decide what is the option. So the committee includes members of both Fraternal Order Police and the ASME units. So there is significant representation. There's about 8 members from those units, and then the rest of the members include county board members and administrative staff from the county. So we have a good cross-section of people. Mr. Alex.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. You said some of what I was going to say. I just wanted to mention in case people weren't aware of it. The reason for the Labor Management Health Insurance Committee's existence is that until about 5 years ago or so, we had benefits essentially written into every labor contract. So we've got, how many bargaining units?
13.
Yeah, 13 bargaining units, and each one basically had the health plan stapled to the back of their contract. And the problem was that if we wanted to change the plan, there's always some labor contract that has just recently been renewed, and we're stuck to that because we promised it to some bargaining unit last year when we negotiated. And so the notion of basically being able to take advantage of a plan change or being able to take advantage of something that would benefit employees and it could conceivably would be a win-win situation for the county and the unions, was just not possible. And so Ms. Busey came up with this, and I think she got the idea from some other jurisdiction that did it, but she promoted this pretty heavily and actually got all the bargaining units to agree to essentially be bound by what this committee decided. So instead of stapling the plan to everybody's contract, every bargaining unit's contract, we stapled something that said, we will accept whatever this committee comes up with. And this committee is, as Rick said, made up part in representatives from each of the bargaining units and part from the county. And so over the past several years, I think that's worked really well. However, there's an obligation on the union members of that committee, and that's that they are essentially there to represent the interest. And I was on this committee for 4 years, which is why I know this. They are obligated to be out there with their members, with their coworkers in that bargaining unit, pushing information toward them and bringing information back to the committee. And I'm a bit concerned about implications that may or may not have happened. I remember last year, which was last year I was on the committee, those folks got an earful from their from their bargaining unit. It was real clear there was communication going on because they would come to the committee and say, here's all the problems that were raised with this. So I don't know if this year they, and I don't want to impugn their motives, but I don't know if this year they figured, well, last year we got beat up, so this year we're not going to share the information, or if they did share the information, it just didn't get shared with the people who have heard from tonight or who have been objecting to this. So I guess I'd like a little more insight into how people feel the process worked this year. I mean, do we get useful feedback from rank and file filtering up to this Labor Management Health Insurance Committee that would make me more comfortable with accepting their recommendation? I mean, generally, I will almost always accept the recommendation of a committee that's done more work on this than I have, which is, in this case, is zero. So I'm inclined to accept the recommendation, but I am somewhat concerned about what we've been hearing, that, hey, maybe people didn't see this coming. And I was going to mention, to Ms. Petrie's point about pooling with Urbana, there is a governance problem there because, written into all our contracts is we'll abide by whatever plan changes this Labor Management Health Insurance Committee comes up with. I don't know whether Urbana has a similar arrangement or bargains individually with their bargains benefits individually with each bargaining unit, but that would probably quickly result in a conflict where our Labor Management Health Insurance Committee wanted one thing and Urbana's labor negotiators wanted something else. So I think we're probably stuck on our own with this Labor Management Health Insurance Committee model, but which is, I think, a far superior model to what we had before, where we had to sort of hash out plans with every bargaining unit every 3 or 4 years. So I guess what I'm asking is people who are on that committee, or John, who sits in those meetings, or Rick, what was your take on how those meetings went this year?
Well, I'll speak first, and of course, anyone, Stan or Robert, Mr. Summers is not here, he's also on the committee, but from my perspective, I believe that the members did talk with folks. I don't know if they had extensive meetings or not. I don't want to put words in the mouth of those committee members as to how they felt. I know that we did have a brief discussion before the vote, if they needed more time or if there was, any interest in, deferring the decision at all, and there wasn't any. And actually, the motions, the motion came to approve the plan from the union members themselves, so it was not initiated by management in the vote. But I'll let Stan, or if anyone else wants to chime in.
Yeah, I think from my attendance at the meetings, I just felt like the groups that were there were vocal. They actually, I felt, definitely knew more than myself as a new person coming to the committee. So I would say that I would have thought that they represented, I would have thought that they were speaking as representatives of their groups, but I wouldn't have anticipated anything different from that. So, yeah.
I guess I agree there with Robert, and served a couple of years with Chris on this before. Yeah, just what you said, there is a lot that goes into this, and I've learned more about health insurance in the last 2 or 3 years than I really care to know. But my final take on it was I felt an obligation from board or management to provide a quality product for our employees, but also fiscally responsible to our county budget. And I think, well, Steve's not here, but I know he and I have talked, and you also, so that's where I feel. I mean, on a personal note, I was really upset when Health Alliance comes out with 51% higher, and then all of a sudden they're down to 11, and they did the same thing this year. They were 9.9%, and the last meeting in August, when we, or whatever that was, we took the vote, we had to hold up. They wanted the July claims results. Well, July claims were way down. And if you remember, my comment that day was, what would they've done? And they lowered their rate 6%, or premium. And I said, what would they've done if July would have skyrocketed? I mean, they're going to raise it 6% from their original bid? I mean, nobody's got a crystal ball. If I had a crystal ball, like I told some of our caucus members, I could figure out the grain market and I wouldn't be sitting here.
It's somewhat of a, I mean, it's an imperfect process. I mean, ideally, everyone would be fully informed. We've had challenges getting members to attend open enrollment meetings. That's always a challenge each year, where that's their best opportunity to be informed about what the benefits are that are available to them. And yet, so few people really take advantage of that. And I know in the past that the individual union members on the committee have had meetings or attempted to schedule meetings. Again, not a great amount of participation in those. So I'm not sure that, you know, if this had been deferred and then there was a lot more time spent on this, that we'd have any less, perhaps, some of the concerns that have been raised. I think change is always going to be a difficult thing to implement, and we've tried to keep the benefits aligned with what we currently enjoy, while at the same time County Board has been able to maintain pay increases. We have not so far talked about any reductions in staff or services, so to try to balance all those different things and also provide a good quality product, I think Blue Cross, in my personal opinion, is one of the best insurance carriers you can have. So I think that we have a good decision from the committee because of the tremendous amount of collaboration and cooperation. I think that it's important for County Board to support the members of the committee in this. It's a very difficult task. I believe that they do a very diligent and conscientious job in assessing these things. And while we may not always agree with all of the decisions that are made, I think they've done their best to try to come to a consensus on this. So I would ask that the County Board support this. One point of clarification or disclosure, I did receive a question today from the co-chair of the committee. It's a legal question. And I sought advice from the chief of the civil division of our state's attorney's office today, and we were not able to determine an answer for that. So before this final action is taken on this at next week's county board meeting, if it is approved and forwarded from the committee tonight, I will be sure to have that answer available, and that we'll take care of that. Any questions? Mr. Alex.
Sorry, Mr. Goss.
Just since I'm new, just a point of clarification. Do the employees pay any portion of their own health care?
They do. This is something that is separately negotiated with each collective bargaining agreement as far as the amount of the contribution and then the caps on contributions. However, we've been working very hard to try to align those over the years. And currently, almost all of the employees, except for nursing home and RPC, pay 10% of the premium each year. The county pays 90% of the premium, subject to caps. Next year, it's going to increase to 12%, and then some contracts will have an increase to 14% the following year, and there will be increases in the caps. Fortunately, because the policy that we're proposing tonight, I think only one of the agreements will actually hit the cap. So I think the increases have been pretty reasonable.
Rick, in the interest of clarity, could you also mention that's for employee coverage? Can you talk about dependent coverage as well?
So let me back up a little bit. The county funds that percentage of the premium for the individual employee that works for the county. If the person selects dependent coverage, they receive an additional $70 a month towards the actual coverage in addition to the county's contribution. The difference then is paid by the employee. So if you're on let's say you have your spouse on the plan, and let's say that I think this year our premiums were about $767 a month for insurance. So we would have paid 90% of that. We would have paid $70 additional if it was a spouse coverage, which I think is closer to maybe about $1,000 a month. So of that roughly $230 difference, 70 of that would be covered by us, and then the employee would pay the remainder of that. And of course, it goes up. If you have family coverage, it's significantly more. Oh, thank you, John. So the current rates are $767 for individual employees. Employee with spouse coverage is $1,016. Employees with children is $959 a month. And then employee with family coverage, so spouse and children, is $1,658.
So is it safe to, I mean, I've always described this as the county pays almost all of the employee premium and the employee pays almost all of their dependent coverage. I mean, is that Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and looking at some of the other entities in the area, I think they have similar types of arrangements. In some cases, they may fully pay for employee, but not much towards the dependent. Others have a cap on the total amount that they'll pay towards coverage, and then the remainder is split on a percentage basis with the employee. I think Champaign pays around $580 a month towards premiums, and then the rest of it's split 60-40. I think it's 60 for the employee. I'm not sure, but it's something like that.
Does that give you the lay of the land? Okay. I would throw out if there is, I'm sorry, Ms. Furtado.
Sort of going forward, I appreciate all the work that everybody did on this committee. I'm super glad that I didn't somehow inherit this committee when I got on the board. I know healthcare is really complicated, and thank you for all that. I still honestly don't think I got an answer from anyone about how much participation there was from the rank and file members. And so is there a way in the future when this is done to more specifically get back from those folks, like what was the, and, you know, we've heard from one person and I've heard from some other people that they don't feel like they were part of the process, and it is hard, right? Change is hard. And so I think that should be a question that there should be an answer to, that's more quantitative. You know, we had 7 meetings and we did this kind of survey, and I'm not saying that that's anybody's, you know, I think everybody on the committee is responsible for that, both the leadership and the county board members, but that should be a question, I think, in the future that should be more easily answered. And if it's not, is that something that committee could sort of take up more robustly in the future, so that we're not about to take a vote and, you know, we're hearing from people saying, hey, I don't feel like my voice was heard, because it is an intensely personal, right, decision for people, their health care. And I just not at all to say that the work that y'all have done is not, I mean, I know it's really, really hard, but just making sure that it's as transparent as possible going forward. Is there a way to make sure that is the case?
I think it's great feedback. I think that's something we can take back to the committee. We have talked about this in the past as well. How can we do a better job of informing employees about potential changes in policies or just what the proposals are? We've not found a good way, again, to do that, but some of the things you've suggested certainly are good ideas. One thing we could do is when this is brought before, assuming this is brought before County Board next week, is that we could have the other co-chair of the committee who's with ASME to maybe provide a little more perspective on that from their side.
Thank you. I'm going to, at this point, it's 10 o'clock. Given the legal question that it sounds like it's still going to be needing to be answered and some of these other concerns, what I'd like to do is ask for a motion to send this to the full county board without recommendation, which keeps it off the consent agenda. It'll still be on the county board agenda, and we will take this up at the full county board meeting if nobody objects. Moved by Mr. Esri and seconded by Mr. Hartke. And if there is no further discussion, certainly thank you for being here, John. And as I walked out, as they were telling me your name, but I appreciate you being here as well. And I would ask all in favor to please signify by saying there's still some comments. Yes.
Well, it's not necessarily a comment, but I do have a conflict of interest. Some of my spouse's company does significant business with some of the listed companies, and I'll recuse myself from the vote.
Your abstention is noted. Yes, sir. Mr. Clemens.
Yes, my wife works for Health Alliance and is an enrollment coordinator and handles the county stuff, so I will be recusing myself too.
Your recusal is noted, and I appreciate you letting me know. Mr. Waddle.
Just point of information, you two should not be a part of the discussion also. You guys okay? All right, thank you.
All in favor of sending this to the full county board next week without recommendation, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. Mr. Snyder and Ms. Ogden. Next on the agenda are the fiscal year 2018 budget decision points and the general corporate fund consolidated budget. I will leave this to your discretion whether you want to take this up tonight or whether you want to address this during the finance portion of the full board meeting.
How fast do you think we can go? I think we can just nail this and get it done.
Okay, thanks, Rick. The floor is yours.
So these revenue and expenditure numbers represent a roll-up of all of the county budgets with the exception of the nursing home budget. So if you want to calculate those in, you can use scenario A or B that was presented earlier tonight. I apologize that red doesn't show up very well. But the revenue to expenditure deficit reflected in fiscal year 2018 is $1.658 million. That deficit is associated with budgeting fund balances for planned capital improvement and capital expenditure projects. It's not uncommon for the county board to have that revenue to expenditure deficit reflected. The county has made significant improvement in the last legislative budget hearing report that you saw, which reflected a revenue to expenditure deficit of over $400,000, and there were some adjustments to the budgets that moved that number closer to $500,000. Some of those improvements are budgeting for the savings in the health insurance plan. Also, the probation services fund has agreed to increase their contribution to the general fund an additional $58,500, bringing that total transfer to the general fund to $183,500. We have eliminated the increase requested by the sheriff for cars. So the sheriff's car budget now stands at $145,000, which is what was budgeted for fiscal year 2017. And also, we have deferred a couple of capital asset expenditure items in the sheriff's budget that we discussed with them that they said that they could hold off another year for those particular expenditures. So the revenue to expenditure deficit right now for the general fund sits at negative $153,000. One of the ways that the county can look at improving revenues is implementation of a municipal aggregation civic contribution fee. For those of you who aren't familiar with the municipal aggregation program, the county entered into the program, I believe, in 2013 for the first time, and that contract was renewed in 2016. Basically, it allows residents to use economies of scale to purchase electricity at a lower cost. And we are in a group with many other governments that ends up driving savings for customers. At the time the program was implemented, the county did not decide to go ahead and collect the civic contribution fee, which is 1/10 of a penny. However, I did ask Good Energy, who is the county's consultant, to go back and look at what those revenues would have been over the last several years if we had implemented that fee. And on average, the revenue is estimated to be about $93,000. So this is an option for the county to increase revenues. It will require an amendment to the current contract with the supplier, which is Homefield or Dynegy. And again, something I want to point out about this program is that it is a voluntary program that residents of Champaign County can opt out of if they do not want to participate in it. What will happen if we move forward with this is that the supplier will be required to send opt-out notices to all residents. So people who are currently in the program would receive an opt-out notice. They would have the opportunity to get out. People who are not in the program would also receive an opt-out notice and would be able to remain with the utility or with an alternate supplier. Yes, it is 100% green energy.
Tammy, to put the 1/10 of a cent in perspective, we know what the average, what the difference between the average rate of the that the aggregated customers get compared to the market rate? I mean, are they saving a penny? Or are they saving saving a penny a kilowatt hour or 2 pennies a kilowatt hour?
In October, the non-summer rate will be 6.3% with the utility, and right now the county's rate is 5.9 cents. So the addition of that 1/10 of a penny would be 6 cents. So 3/10 of a penny savings per kilowatt hour.
Okay.
If you
For some improvement on the expenditure side, if we go ahead and implement the civic contribution, we would still need to cut about $60,000 from expenditures to be able to close the deficit. One of the ways that we could do that is to utilize public safety sales tax fund balance to fund about $60,000 to $70,000 of facilities capital improvements. As you know, annually the county budgets $532,000, which is a transfer from the general fund to the capital asset replacement facilities budget to fund capital improvement projects. That is under the direction of the facilities committee. And in speaking with Mr. Brenner, there are a significant number of improvements that are necessary in fiscal year 2018 at the Adult Detention Center, one of which is replacement of the boilers, and that's estimated, I think, to be $178,000. So it would be completely appropriate to flow $70,000 of public safety sales tax funds into that budget and relieve the general fund of that $70,000 in order to generate some savings for the general fund. Another option would be implementation of a hiring deferral. This is something I think the county has done before, not since I have been here. It's really difficult to quantify exactly how much savings this would generate. So, working off of some assumptions, the $99,000 that you see here is basically 0.5% of the budgeted FTE budget. There are some parameters that would surround this. It's my understanding that it would not apply to elected officials' departments. However, we would obviously want to encourage cooperation.
Does the $99,000 include benefits, or is that just salary?
That's salary. Again, another thing that it's difficult to quantify in terms of benefits in relation to health insurance in particular, because we wouldn't know if that employee was taking that or not. So you're correct, that potentially could generate more than $99,000 savings, but again, that $99,000 is somewhat speculative in itself.
We also have no idea when employees are going to leave or what the payout is going to be when they leave. So that's very much an imperfect science trying to predict what's going to happen there.
So a couple of other options that aren't necessarily recommended by administration, but we just wanted to bring them to your attention. One would be a 1% cut from expenditures for departments with non-personnel budgets over $250,000. As Mr. Snyder and I have mentioned multiple times, the commodities and services budgets are already extremely strained. This would affect, I think, about 8 departments. And I do say here that 2 departments requested increases for non-personnel expenditures. It's actually 3. I looked at that again this afternoon, and I failed to include the sheriff's correction department. He requested approximately $100,000 increase for a nursing contract. The other departments were the circuit clerk or the county clerk's office, who requested increases for election judges, and also the circuit court, who requested increases for attorney fees. So this is not really a recommended option, but I just wanted to bring it to your attention because we really tried to weed through the budget and figure out some potential ways that we could close this deficit.
Just one quick note here also. Those of you on the board last year remember that we also, in the development of the 2016 budget, there was a 4% cut that was implemented. We also saw a very high number of budget amendments throughout the year for necessities, so things that were essentially commodities and services. That's why we don't really think it's a good idea to try to go to this well again. I don't think there's anything left in it to get.
And And the second alternate option listed here would be elimination of the 1% merit increase for non-bargaining employees. If you recall, earlier this year, the county board approved increase of 1% for cost of living and 1% for merit for non-bargaining employees. That is fairly in line with what the contractual increases will be for fiscal year 2018. And Mr. Snyder also mentioned at that time that, we were unsure if there were going to be furlough days implemented, so we wanted there to be an equal impact to all employees if that occurred, which at this point we are no longer recommending that. Non-bargaining employees will see their health insurance contribution increase from 10% to 12% in 2018, which is why this is not really a favorable option. However, this would generate about $70,000 in savings.
Do you want me to cover the last slide?
Sure.
Okay. So just to reiterate from the discussion of the nursing home budgets, we have two budgets. Budget A is essentially a status quo budget, other than the debt service reimbursement, which we have accounted for in the general fund. It assumes census improvement. It doesn't fund depreciation. It leaves the loans remaining outstanding, and also we have a concern about recovery or making sure that we pay down the accounts payable, and we did not include any provision for that. Budget B assumes the separation of the home sometime in the first 6 months of fiscal year 18. It contains 6 months of operating expenditures and also 6 months of wind-down expenditures. It does include payment in full of accounts payable and all loans. The GO debt service, which will be $1.98 million, is indicated in the slide there. That bond is not callable until the end of 2018, so the money would be probably put in escrow or some other, we just reserve it somewhere to pay that off. And then it would also take care of any other transaction expenditures. So we're very close to closing the deficit at this point as far as the 153. The nursing home is going to require some thought, of course, as to what the county board would like to do. Depending on which direction we go, we may have some significant decisions to make on that. So, but I think that as far as the the recommendations, so the first couple of recommendations on the decision points, I think are probably the best options to consider. Mr. Alex?
Thank you for laying out what we have ahead of us. Any questions for Mr. Snyder or Ms. Ogden with regard to the presentation here? We're obviously not going to make these decisions tonight. These are points that we'll have to work through over the next month. See no questions. I appreciate your presentation. And our last item of business tonight is the semi-annual review of closed session minutes. I would ask for a motion to acknowledge the state's attorney's recommendation that, as per resolution number 7969, none of the minutes of the Finance Committee closed sessions are currently ripe for review. Mr. Goss and Mr. Harper. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. That motion carries. I have no chair's report. Items for consent are A, 3 through 22, D, 1 through 3, E1, and that's it. Thank you for your
Thank you,
endurance
Mr.
tonight.
Alex. Is there any other business? Seeing none, we're adjourned.